It's time for Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott is in Macungie. Richard Campbell's in Puerto Vallarta. But we're going to do a show. Yes, we are. The first Patch Tuesday was yesterday. The biggest Patch Tuesday. The most patches since 2017, including some pretty serious flaws. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's better than crying, I guess. We'll also do a lot of conversation about Microsoft's AI models in Microsoft 365 and Copilot. It's all kind of crazy. In fact, it's so crazy, Microsoft's doing a reorg all around AI. Plus new Surface hardware and more. It's all coming up next on Windows Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell, episode 915, recorded Wednesday, January 15th, 2025. Magic tricks for cats. It's time for Windows Weekly, the show where we cover the latest Microsoft news with my good pals. To my right, Mr. Paul Thurrott, Thurrott.com, leanpub.com. He is in Macungie, PA. To my further right, Richard Campbell. He is, of course, of RunAs Radio fame and .NET Rocks, and you're in Puerto Vallarta?
Puerto Vallarta.
Nice.
I assume it's 75 degrees, but I can never quit Windows Weekly. What can you do?
Oh, well, thank you. I'm sorry the curtains are closed, though. Don't we want to see a beautiful...
It would be absolutely blinding out there.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, it is sunny, I'm sure.
It's a contrast thing. I really was trying to make this work on the patio, but it's quite noisy out there.
Yeah. Well, the good news is Paul will be joining you next week.
Mm-hmm. That's right. We got another bedroom over here all set for the couple.
How fun. And then, Paul, are you going on to Mexico City, or is it just a little PV?
We're actually going to fly to Mexico City on Saturday. And when do we come there? I think Monday, probably.
Nice.
Monday, yeah. And you're using one of their local discount airlines. I can't wait to hear what that experience is like.
Oh, which one?
I've been flapping my arms in anticipation of the...
Here, hold this rope.
What is the airline?
El Avion. No, it's
Volaris?
It's a Volaris, yeah.
Volaris, okay.
Now, when I see this out, I'm like, who is that? I'm like, oh, wow, it's the EasyJet of Mexico. This would be awesome.
Yeah, so we've taken, what's the big one there is...
Aero Mexico.
Just Aero Mexico, which is great. Actually, they're at least the...
Oh, yeah, I've been on Aero. I like Aero Mexico.
They're a top-tier airline. No.
Yeah. But, I listen, I've helped push a bus in the snow. I got this. It's fine.
Ultra. It's their tagline is ultra low cost.
Right.
That's a little scary.
In Spanish, ultra means crap. But
you bring the duct tape, we'll play with you.
Oh, have fun. I'm so jealous of you guys.
Short off too.
Yeah,
we'll have some fun up here.
Yeah,
it should be good.
Second largest airline in Mexico, tantalizingly low prices.
Tantalizing.
But according to the San Diego Consumer Action Network, it's no way to run an airline. Hellaciously bad.
Tuesday, I guess.
Wow, this is going to be interesting. When is this? Oh, this article's from 4 years ago. You know what? In fact, it's not just 4 years ago. It's March 2020, in the height of the pandemic.
Oh yeah, really, the launch of the pandemic.
The launch.
The launch.
You may be subjecting yourself to hellaciously bad customer service and scheduling tricks that simply wouldn't be tolerated under U.S. law.
Okay.
March 2020, I was at Paul's place debating whether I was going to fly home or not.
May never go home again.
Yeah.
Yikes. All right.
Yeah, you had an Uber not show up at like 3:00 in the morning or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And I managed to get home in time for the very first day of a 2-week quarantine, too.
I remember that because it was St. Patrick's Day that we shut down March 17th, 2020.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And boy, it's funny how this recedes. I remember when this was all happening, I looked back at the reminiscences and I talked to people who were around in 1918. And they didn't really remember. Did you wear masks?
How many were there? Right?
Not many. There were a handful. They don't remember it, and I thought that's really weird because that must have been a devastating.
Was a huge anti-mask outcry.
Same thing happened exactly. Yeah. And
my kids
now
were
I understand
one of the last planes to come back to the United States. They were in Jamaica or near Jamaica, and we didn't think they were going to get back.
Yeah. My son was in Asia, and he was kind of hanging out in Bali, for some time. They had a villa, a bunch of young people, and I think they were having a ball. Eventually, though, the Balinese, he said they're kind of looking at giving us a side
you guys,
eye. Really,
you eat a lot, compared to the other ones that live here normally.
Yeah, they really wanted us to get out of here, so we flew him
Let's just get you out of here. How does that
and
sound?
we quarantined him. I put him in quarantine for 2 weeks to make sure that he didn't bring anything back. Those were the days.
Yep. 5 years ago.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I can see now you really do blank it out. It's like, let's not remember that.
I'm firmly of the opinion that we will have grandchildren that will look at us the same way we looked at our Depression era grandparents. Like, oh yeah, survived the Depression.
Oh, by the way, I hope it's like that, because the alternative is this just keeps happening.
Mommy, why does Pop still wear a mask everywhere he goes?
Why does he look like the Intel bunny man? And also, what's Intel?
yeah, really. Oh, now I remember. All right, let's start talking about Windows. Yesterday, Microsoft released on Patch Tuesday the largest patch bundle they haven't since 2017.
I forgot to check. Let me see if the biggest bug of all has been fixed.
There were 3 0 days. It has not.
That's amazing. All right. So File Explorer in Windows 11 has a bug where if you click the whatever it's called, the ... menu, it goes up off the top of the screen. Still happens. So yeah, I don't know what they were doing over the past 36 days, but not fixing that bug. Well, so
161 patches. Is that right?
Wow. No, I don't. I mean,
it was a huge number.
If it is, it's all security updates, bug fixes, but not that bug fix.
11 critical flaws, the largest CVEs addressed in any single month since at least 2017.
I'm fascinated that this is a thing, because there's nothing new in these updates, which is like the first time in 3 years. Like, the thing that's most interesting about this month to me is that they did not add any new features to Windows.
Well, it was December, right? They weren't working on anything. They were this holiday time. No,
I know. It was a nice break.
But they were saving them up, so that's good.
Yeah, I got up early like you do on Christmas Day, waiting for that download to appear in Windows Update, even though I know it doesn't happen until about 1 p.m. my time. And not much going on there is from a functional perspective.
Yeah. So
actually, is this the one? Scroll down a little bit if this is the right page. There's see this video. You can tell there's nothing in it because the video is productivity tips for the new year.
Wait a minute. This is KB5050009, the Patch Tuesday release, right. And with it a video of productivity tips for the new year.
Well, because usually that video talks about some of the stuff that's new. There's nothing.
Oh, I see. These are all security patches. So this would be the video that would say all the new features, but there weren't any.
There weren't any. That's right. Listen, I consider this to be a resounding success.
What's tip 1?
With Windows 11, you can customize every
You can buy a Mac at apple.com/Mac.
Oh, my.
I don't know.
So
there's nothing to say about this except it came and it went, and
nobody's been hurt. That's a good sign.
Well, it is 24H2, so plenty of people have been hurt. I think since the last time we did the show last week, I've heard about 3 new 24H2 problems, one of which is literally being resolved as we speak, a kind of a Dolby audio issue that Microsoft actually did issue a fix for. But yeah, so there's that terribleness, and we get some really good AI terribleness to talk about later in the show, but I'll save that little surprise for then. And I mean, this is like Windows Update Patch Tuesday used to be, right? Boring.
Yeah, just uneventful, nothing to talk about.
Yep. So no reason to talk about it. That's why it feels
so weird.
Actually, if anything, the big news we have this week, Windows-wise, is actually Windows 10 related. But real quick, Windows Insider Program, I believe there's only been one build since last week. It was a Canary build. We don't know why they do this anymore. There's nothing new in it. I'm struggling to understand what they're working on with Canary, but there's that. But so every Friday I do a column called Ask Paul, and I let readers, write in with their questions, and I answer them. It usually ends up being this 3,000 to 6,000 word Iliad and the Odyssey type thing. But one of the questions last week was, and this is an interesting little poser, I guess, for everyone in the community, is do you think that is Microsoft serious about this October end of support date for Windows 10?
I get that question on the RunAs side.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be one of the biggest topics of the year, unless we have another CrowdStrike. And the issue here is twofold, right? So it's they've done this before. We've had Windows XP, Windows 7, where they've had to extend the life cycle, and they've offered extended security, paid security. But it's also unprecedented in the sense that they're offering it to consumers for the first time, just for 1 year. It's a per PC cost. I think it's $60 for the first year, and then it doubles. 35. Okay, whatever the price. I actually don't know.
Yeah, it goes up.
It goes up. It doubles every year. I know that. And the other unprecedented bit, and we talked about this last week, is that at this time in its life cycle, as it was about to expire in support, Windows 7 had dramatically lower usage share out in the world than Windows 10 does today. And my response to that question was that there were a lot of factors that would go into this. I really don't have a read on, or I should say now I do. I didn't have a read on it on Friday per se, but I felt that number was important. 65% of the user base still on Windows 10, actually kind of a big deal. But also, I think which customers are still on Windows 10 and where they are in the migration makes a difference too, if that makes sense. So in other words, some customers are more important than others. Some customers might have enough weight that they could go to Microsoft and say, yeah, you're not doing this, and they might have to make a change,
Well, and one of the options would be that Microsoft cuts them a deal on extended support just to stick to their guns.
That's right. Yes. I mean, and there are a lot of backroom deals like that occur that we don't hear a lot about. The one I heard that was sort of similar to this was that time when the UK hospital system was hacked. They were all still running, I think it was XP.
Yep.
And it was long out of support. And I think it was Terry Myers at the time. So, what am I going to do? Not patch the bug for the UK hospital system? Yeah. It's like, obviously we're going to fix that. So we'll see. But I've had a tough read on this. But then yesterday, Microsoft published a couple of, one's a blog post, one was just a support document where they reiterated the October date and then announced that they will not support Office on Windows 10 after that date, which is kind of interesting. Very unclear about whether Office would be supported if you were paying for the security updates. Logically, my brain says yes.
It feels like a random threat they're going to back away from.
Yes. I mean, yes. This is just so... I appreciate the effort. I appreciate what they're trying to do. I get it.
Yeah, nice one, guys.
Yeah. I mean,
no.
Well, like in a vague sense, like Windows 11, for all the criticism when it came out of the gate, one of my things was like, simplifying something as complex as Windows is hard. I appreciate they took on the effort. I wish they had let some adults, tackle the problem, but whatever. They gave it a shot. So I don't know. I feel like they are going to stick to this date.
I'm thinking it's January, and then we're talking about October, and
anything could happen.
A whole fiscal year rolls over.
Yeah.
I think when Amy Hood's folks start focusing on the next fiscal and look at the situation, then pressure may be on.
Yeah, but I feel like for every pressure in that sense, there's kind of the opposing pressure, which is that the PC market hasn't rebounded like they thought it would for maybe the second or third year in a row now.
Oh, wait, didn't you hear at CES? This is the year of the PC.
Yeah, but like that has to actually come true for it to be true. Yeah. And people actually have to upgrade. Microsoft is fighting what is now a decades-long problem with a lack of enthusiasm on the part of anybody who uses a PC to upgrade. For all kinds of good reasons, honestly.
Because it ain't broke.
Yeah. And it's just a new era. So, when they announced, I don't remember when this was. It must have been, actually, it's probably tied to trustworthy computing, but whenever it was, roughly 20 years ago, when they announced, maybe it was older than that, whatever it was, the 10-year support life cycle. Mm-hmm. That felt really aggressive at the time. But in the 20 years since, or whatever it's been, PCs have obviously gotten a lot more reliable, which still feels like a weird thing to say, but they have.
But the rate of hardware change tapered off after 2000.
Yes.
Really.
Yep. Yeah, that too. I mean, there's lots of factors, right? There's the reality that most people use other devices for things they used to use a PC for. So the PC is a very laser focused kind of a thing for most people. And most of the time it's, traditional PC based productivity work, which doesn't work.
And if it doesn't work, you go back to your iPad.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of things kind of arrayed against it, but they're not just trying to help themselves. I mean, presumably the majority, well, I don't know this for a fact, but yeah, I mean, certainly over 50% of their revenues come from these enterprise agreements that it doesn't actually matter what version of Windows they're on. There's no bump, Right. So in many ways, the bump here is for the rest of the industry. Like a healthy PC industry helps Microsoft, obviously, because you don't want to see any problems there. But I just don't see a lot of enthusiasm.
The question is the motivation here, right? Like, are you wanting to get everyone to Windows 11 so you don't have to support two versions of an OS? Because logically, there should be a Windows 12 on the horizon.
Yep.
And you don't want to support 3? Okay. So maybe drag out a proposal for a 12 to make 10 seem really okay.
Yeah, right.
Or are you really trying to move the PC market? Because I just don't think you care that much. If you're Microsoft, I mean, the hardware vendors certainly care, but does Microsoft?
Well, so from a unit perspective, I feel like we've kind of plateaued or bottomed out, however you want to say that. Like, I feel like we're in the same kind of area for the most part, other than cyclical upgrade business type things. But from the PC maker's perspective, you could say, well, we're really hoping that if someone does upgrade, with the idea that this thing's going to last for X number of years, then maybe they get a more premium computer, maybe higher margins, et cetera. Like,
well, and for a while there, like last June, we were talking about, well, you're going to need an MPU. It's just that I've yet to see a justification for needing an MPU, and I see Microsoft distinctly not motivated to do this because the more cloud you consume, the better off for them.
Yep. It's, Yep. We have been and will continue to be so laser focused on the AI stuff that it's hard to almost see the rest of the world now.
Yes.
But
it's irrational.
One of the many big stories with Microsoft and AI is this, almost insane, maybe literally insane focus on AI and just how off it is, from their customers' expectations. They're just in a completely different space, and it's bizarre. And we'll get into this because there's a lot going on there. It's
right, to be clear, again.
Yeah. Well,
every so often they're aligned with their customer needs, and things are pretty good. And then somebody comes along who wants a promotion and has a vision and is going to manifest it against the will of the customer until the customer finally pulls back.
Yep. I had this in the sort of in certification space, which is not in the notes or anything, but you've reminded me of this. I had this idea sometime in the past week or 10 days where you bring up a computer maybe after installing an update, or it's a new computer, whatever it is. And there's a screen. Well, there may be a screen that has something to do with OneDrive folder backup. And they really aggressively want you to use this feature. If you do see the screen, the language has changed. And I don't actually remember what it used to say, but they want you to say yes. But then it said opt out. It actually said opt out, which is a curious turn of phrase.
Yep.
And I thought, what if this means something? What if this indicates that they're backing off from this policy of auto-enabling folder backup for people like they do to me all the time? And I thought, that's interesting. So I'm going to pay attention to that.
I'm wondering if it's an MVP. Let's see how many people click on this. Whether it does anything or not.
It turns out you're closer to the truth than I am, because I've upgraded my Surface Laptop 7 to Pro from home, the Windows 11 Home. You're supposed to see that screen on Pro during setup. It honestly, it doesn't appear every single time, but unlike Home, you could see it. And I did choose opt out on it, and I did decline the offer 3 different times after I got into the operating system, and it's still auto-installed. Still auto-enabled this feature.
We now have that little data point that you did select opt-out.
Yep. So opt-out is as meaningless as any language when it comes to Microsoft. So I was kind of hoping that meant something, but it doesn't mean anything.
Now you're just talking crazy talk, Mr. Throt.
I know. So. Yeah. Okay. So Office not supported officially after October, But
I don't know what that really means.
I know nobody does. That's and by the way, I say that having read and reread that announcement post, I don't know what it means, because one of the things you're looking for in that language is, okay, I'm going to pay for additional updates, security updates for Windows 10. That means my system is supported. That tells me that a valid Office license should also be supported.
Don't support Office. Like, what does that even mean? Only when I do a PSS request and they say, "Oh, you're running Win 10, you have to upgrade 11 before we'll talk to you."
If you don't read this thing carefully, it looks like Windows 10 right now is in the same space as Windows 7, 8, and 8.1. They literally commingle these things together. Like, these are all things that are, or soon will be, unsupported. It's not great. So this blog post or whatever it was, community post, I always look for clarity, and I so rarely get it. And this is a great example of that. But they are going to give you the new Outlook in Windows 10. So for those people,
whether you want it or not,
I mean, they did just get rid of Mail and Calendar, right? So those things went out of support at the end of December. And I guess it makes sense on that level. It's the replacement for those apps in Windows, right? It's not just this thing that will come in Office eventually by the time we're all retired, but is also a constituent part of Windows. So
I think I said this last show, I am getting comfortable with the new Outlook on one machine.
I have a comparison later in the show to this, because as I think I said last week, you said something like, "Oh, I wanted to talk to you about this Outlook thing that you told me I had to install on my computer." And I was like, here we go. And anyway,
I may have done that deliberately.
It worked out better than those things usually do for me.
Yeah. No, it's disturbing to me that I hadn't turned it off as I usually did.
Right. There you go.
And now knew where to click on things. Like, it was actually a smooth workflow it wasn't interrupting, right? That moment where I turned to it, I got what I wanted from it, and I moved on. And then the back of my head went, wait, you just had a good experience with the new Outlook. That's not right.
This is how I rate touchpads on laptops, because when they're unreliable, which they often are, I disable 3 and 4 finger gestures, so that I'm not by mistake using this feature that does, task view or whatever. And sometimes I'll review a laptop. I'll use it for 6 weeks, and then I go to write the review and I'm looking at my notes and I don't have anything about the touchpad. I'm like, wait a minute. And I go look at settings and I never changed it, which means this thing's been working great, because I noticed that immediately, So that happens sometimes.
No, I think it's the challenge of being critical is that things that work just don't pop up.
Yeah.
Like you need that checklist to say, here are the things that normally annoy you. The fact that it didn't is extraordinary.
Yeah, this is the truism, I think, of life in general, that you could have this thing that is annoying you and you're really, not you, I mean anyone, but you're vocal about it. You can't stand it. It's making you crazy. And then it goes away and you're like, it doesn't, it's not met with like the opposite, kind of enthusiasm you should have for something that doesn't stink anymore. But yeah.
But I also deeply appreciate the old Outlook. Like, it's an orphan in a lot of ways, right? Like, it's so odd. It's its own
always
thing.
Has been, really.
And I know we're going to get into this later, but clearly, if you're a developer and not working on AI at Microsoft, your days are numbered.
Oh my God, I know. I want to talk to you about this.
Everything out.
We're going to get to this because this.
Right, and then that's what it seems to be. So every you're allowed one of each product that isn't an AI product. You're not allowed two.
Yep. There you go. I don't know what the call is for this, but one of the things that occurred as Apple switched over to Apple Silicon on the Mac is that Parallels came out with a new version of their virtual machine software, Parallels Desktop, but it didn't support x86 VMs, right? So you had to have an ARM VM, which, makes sense if you understand the architecture for these things. Of course, there aren't a lot of ARM, OSs that run on Apple Silicon. So Windows 11 now is actually fully supported, so that's nice. And then there's some Linux distributions that work, but they're not as well supported, but they are there. But this past week, they enabled running x86 Windows VMs only, so Windows client or server.
So this is an emulation then?
Yeah, it's very slow. There's literally, I think they ship you a gerbil. It runs in a wheel, and it kind of powers. It's not, it's not really ready for prime time. But I guess a lot of people have asked for this, and maybe this is something that will
This is kind of virtual machine in a virtual machine. So, the inception problem exists.
That's right. It's like you're holding a mirror up to a camera,
Yeah.
So that's there. I mean, they're working on it. That's kind of cool. They kind of implied they were heading toward this.
Just in time for it not to be relevant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if Windows for ARM starts running well, why would you run an x86 instance?
Yes. Well, there maybe I'm devil's advocating this. You may have a legacy app from maybe in a business that only runs on x86, and this is the one thing that keeps you from doing this, or something. Maybe. But this feels like a small use case to me. But yeah.
Now we can think about the fun of the Windows in ARM instance doing interpolation of an x86 app across to ARM into an ARM virtual machine.
I mean, I'm not sure if the Prism emulator is that good, but it's
Yeah. But it speaks to what Parallels really needs to do when you have one of those good hardware-based interpreters. Is can you do a pass through a VM? For it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but that's we've had that kind of interop between virtual machines before, but it takes special work to do it.
This reminds me of back in the very early days of virtual PC, which at the time was what we think of as sort of a software-based virtualization engine, not a hypervisor-based one. And it was miraculous that you could run Windows on a Mac, back in the early PowerPC days. It was terrible too, right? I mean, it was just awful. Like the performance was really bad.
Yeah.
But at least it worked.
Now we were using that virtual PC for testing, right? It was about, we had some machines running a 3.1.1 implementation, some machines running a 95 implementation, and we just had to test everything. You didn't want to have one of each hardware.
Right.
And so the fact that we could get one Torquay box and run virtual PC and test each of them, it worked.
Microsoft bought that company, didn't they? And they brought out eventually something called Server that later was replaced by Hyper-V, which was a software-based jig. But also with, I guess, 7, there was an XP mode thing briefly. That technology running Windows XP for those customers that needed that and this kind of thing forever for some reason. We can't let go of the old stuff. I don't know. What a world.
It's something. All right. Well, apparently we're taking a break.
All right.
Or not. Let's move on.
Yeah. So I've written so much about this. I'm going to try not to babble through this because it's just so big. The more you get into it, the more it kind of expands out. But the AI era, such as it is that we live in now, if we just kind of boil it down to the Microsoft thing and try not to pay too much attention to everything else that's going on around us, has been sheer chaos, right? This past week I wrote,
it's exploration.
It's
right?
it's
you're just trying to figure it out.
The way I think of this is that we often throw out these numbers like they mean anything, but 2/3 of Microsoft's revenues from Windows in this case come from businesses, not from consumers. It's probably closer to 90%, by the way, but whatever that number is.
Now, you're not talking about 2/3 of Microsoft's overall income. You're meaning their Windows income comes from enterprise customers.
Yeah, because it's all, no one's buying Windows. I mean, there are a couple $100 million a year in Windows licenses, but compared to all the enterprise agreements that are ongoing, the amount of money that they make from business is just, I think, astronomically higher.
Sure.
And yet, that is the audience, the majority of their customers who do not want this constant churn of change. That is what AI brings to everything that it touches, right? And Microsoft has not just embraced this thing, they've lit the fire and they're running from building to building, fanning the flames. And it's, since the beginning of 2023, it's been this kind of, like I said, constant churn. You see it in things small, like here's this new product. Oh, wait, we're going to rebrand it to Copilot within the span of months, something that the old Microsoft would have taken several years to make that change, right? To the sheer number of products they release. And now this year, we're seeing this major change in business model, which in Microsoft's case is actually a set of changes because, of course, it is. Nothing can be simple. So it's complicated. So the other day, I wrote a story about the 15 months it's been since we got Copilot in Windows and just the sheer chaos of that. The number of times they just moved the icon on the taskbar. The number of times they changed the app to be something completely different, right? I mean, it just goes on and on and on. It's kind of crazy. But the one thing we sort of saw coming, because they started talking about this, I guess, in September, and then a lot more in November at Ignite, is this, people try to define these things in different ways. I think I've called this like Copilot 2.0 or 3.0, whatever the number is, but moving to this kind of agentic model, right? Which does have that feel of eventually something's going to stick. Let's just keep throwing things out and seeing how it goes.
Yeah.
But from a business model perspective, the way that Microsoft has done this is we're going to give away some stuff for free on the web. And then we're going to do the same stuff in Windows and then some other stuff in Windows. And then we're going to have some other stuff in Windows that will be free, but only if you have a Copilot Plus PC, which really confuses people. And then we're going to have these paid services that are really expensive, you know, and without, again, getting into the nitty gritty details, it doesn't matter what SKU you're on, consumer or commercial, but you pay some amount of money per user per month or per year for Microsoft 365. And then you pay 300 to 500x or 5x, sorry, 3 to 5x for Copilot for Microsoft 365 or Copilot Pro if you're a consumer. And it just doesn't feel commensurate with
that's clear as mud.
value.
I think that's so obvious now how to do this.
Yeah. Well, okay. So so.
And I'm sorry, 3 to 5 times as much. I went $20 for Copilot. It depends on what SKU.
Yeah. So, well, Copilot.
If you're running an E5, you're paying $150 a month for that.
Yep. No, the Copilot Pro is consumer. So, Copilot, or we'll say Microsoft 365 family is $120 a year, 6 users, 1 terabyte, all the apps, multiple devices, $20 per user per month if you want to do Copilot Pro. So, 1 user.
Right.
If you just had one of the 6, pay for that. Your price for Microsoft 365 would go up 3x that year. It's insane.
Yeah. Again, that's you're looking at it from a consumer point of view.
Well, no,
right?
that's just one example. But if you look at it from the business point of view, yes, it depends on what SKU you're using. But
yeah, because a half a dozen E5s is nearly $10,000 a year.
Yeah, but that's not the only SKU that can use this. Like, I mean, it's not based on the price of the base SKU. It's the same price no matter, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, no matter what. I think this is mostly a Conway's Law problem that the structure of the organization reflects the way they make products.
Oh God, yes. And so, yeah, by the way, that is one of Microsoft's core problems forever. I mean,
every time.
The hierarchy of the business showing through in the product that comes out, that kind of thing.
Yeah. They will not allocate developers to a project that isn't making money. And so they have to attach this new product with a price tag to justify the existence of the developers.
Well,
okay, my camera's not focusing. I'm sorry. So if I feel a little blurry to you, it's because I'm trying to understand this. Isn't AI a competitive marketplace though, or is there something that Copilot does?
Yes,
it's only competitive marketplace if somebody's making money.
No, but I understand. But I mean, from the point of view of the purchaser, there are many different AIs you could choose from. Does Copilot have an advantage because of its integration?
Yeah, because you get one bill. Right. One of the main advantage reasons a company would stick with Microsoft 365 is you get it all. It's easy. It's not like it's not like it's uncompetitive. It's probably one of the best of this type of thing that there is. Right. There's only a couple, but I mean, it's probably one of the better ones. That's not really the concern. It's just that there are different models. Like if you look at the way subscription services are, like in the consumer space, you have like ad supported and then paid. Is one typical one. It's not standard across everything, but that's one of the ways you could do it. And Microsoft, sort of, right? But the one thing that they indicated and are now starting to roll out is that if you pay for a Microsoft 365 subscription, they're actually going to give you AI credits every month. And you can use those previously exclusive to Microsoft 365 features up until those credits are used up. Like everything you do uses some credits, right?
So a certain number of tokens kind of thing.
And, to me, that's fair, right? Because regardless of the actual price of the paid subscription, at least this gives anyone the opportunity to try it. And those people that use it the most heavily and are actually running out of credits could say, okay, you know what? Actually, it makes sense for me to pay $20 a month.
Yeah, if you ran out of credits, clearly because you were using it. And so you're going to run out of the moment where you really want an answer to something, and you're going to be much more likely to say, okay, I'll pay.
This to me is an acceptable, compromise. You kind of have to accept that, look, this AI stuff is happening, whether you want it or not. Mm-hmm. I had written that thing back in August where I was like, look, I'm not paying for AI. And I mean that like I will pay for a word processor, but I'm not paying for spell checking separately. Like I will pay for a photo editor, but I'm not going to pay for this thing that removes the background. Like that That needs to be part of the thing.
These are features, not products.
Features. Or like enhancements.
Well, aren't we seeing that now with GitHub Copilot?
Oh, don't you dare. No, we're going to talk about this. Don't you dare.
Does Microsoft Copilot have anything comparable to ChatGPT 4.0? And it does.
And it
is. It's the same thing.
Okay. How's it labeled?
Well, Leo, I'm glad you asked. They've changed it 5 times. The most, I'm not kidding. They just today announced the latest name change. So under the terms of this new model, that thing that started as Bing Enterprise Chat and eventually became Microsoft 365 Chat is now available for free with this token. No, it's not this. It's a different system. But if you want to use agents, they have a pay-as-you-go thing, which is completely separate from everything I just talked about. But you get some amount of functionality. And if you pay for Microsoft 365 Copilot, it's wide open. You get pretty much everything, by the way, except for some agentic capabilities, which are still pay-as-you-go. But still, I am arguing, I guess, literally, it's better than it was, because before it was like the haves and the have-nots. You pay a lot and you get stuff. You pay nothing, you get basically nothing, at least in the Microsoft 365 Copilot sense. But now you do, or now it's starting to happen. So to me, this makes a lot of sense. But then Google today announced, and I saw this announcement, I thought, I know exactly what they're doing. They're going to copy Microsoft again. When Microsoft did the Copilot stuff, they came out with the same thing with Gemini, same price for consumers, same price for businesses, just different name, Google thing instead. But that's not what they did. Interestingly, they came out with a different approach. They are raising the prices of Workstation across all of the tiers by less than 20%. And they're not going to sell what they call Gemini Advanced or Gemini add-ons anymore, which were $20 to $30 a month each per user. So now everyone just gets everything. You pay a little bit more and you get more. Now, I actually think that's even better. And part of the calculus there is that Microsoft is also raising the price of Microsoft 365. They haven't done it in the Americas and they haven't done it in Western Europe yet, but they have started doing it in parts of Asia and I think Australia, New Zealand. And those prices are going up like 45%. Like they're not. Yeah. So we'll see what they do here, but we'll just asterisk that for now.
It's a data center thing too, right? Like I know they tend to test on smaller markets, but at the same time, it's like the data center resources in the South Pacific are far more constrained.
And there aren't less users in Asia, obviously, but there may be fewer users of this stuff. I don't know. I don't actually know that, but yes. So it's happening. I mean, I think it's fair to say by the end of this year, we will all be paying more for Microsoft 365. We'll see how that happens, how that goes. But for now, Microsoft has made a step forward as far as meeting the needs of its customers, I think, in a way that is meaningful. Google's made an even bigger.
I just don't see why they don't roll this into the price of the product and stop breaking.
As long as it doesn't, double the price of the product or whatever it is. I mean, that's the.
Well, and again, for the consumer edition, that's a problem.
The worry. That's the worry. So we'll see.
It seems unwise when you're spending $130 a month on an E5 that you really want $20 more. Like just better to make it 150 E5 and it comes with it.
Do you think?
But here's me being the enterprise guy and you being the consumer guy, and the pricing, and they're using the same pricing strategy. It's insane. Like, what do you think?
I could see why enterprise isn't gonna. This is more enterprise, but as a consumer, I feel like my AI dollars are better spent somewhere else.
Right. I know.
That's why I say, isn't it a competitive market? Can't consumers?
It is a competitive market.
Move around.
Yeah, so I mean, this is anecdotal, obviously. I'm just, I know some people who do what they do. Like, who cares? But it surprises me how many people I know who are not technical people who pay for ChatGPT, for example. This came up twice over last weekend, and it's like, I'm sorry, what do you do? And one of these guys who's like just part of the family. He's not related to me by blood or anything, but a couple of bloodlines removed or whatever. He said, I use this thing all day, every day. I use it all the time. I use it way more than I ever thought I would use it.
Yeah.
And that kind of blows my mind. But there you go. So
but also at $20 a month, like, it's coffee money. What do you care?
Yeah. Well, but but
that's what I'm saying is that Microsoft has to be sensitive to the fact that there is also Anthropic and OpenAI and Mistral.
And also that I am, as an individual, paying them $120 a year for this already. That's the thing. To me, a lot of this stuff feels like things that you would have added to this product for free 3, 5, 10 years ago, because these are just features of the product.
So on one hand, we have this pitch of, well, you're already paying me, so paying me more is easy. Yep. And on the other hand, it's like, really, you're going to ding me 20? Like, if I got to spend 20, I'll go spend it on something new.
It's yes. And this is literally like the difference between an enterprise / commercial customer and an individual. Like, as an individual, you could almost act in a way that you're seeking revenge on Microsoft, and to punish them for their ills, I'm going to use ChatGPT, which is hilarious because, by the way, they make 21% of that revenue. But whatever. You don't know that, and you're trying to hurt them for some reason, whatever it is. But yeah, but to Leo's point, though,
and if they just discounted the consumer version,
well, but this is part of the age-old clash within Microsoft, where the people representing the EA side of the house don't ever want to see that happen, because they don't want enterprise to come to them and say, "Excuse me, this thing's free over there. We give you a lot more money than those people do. What's up?" So there's a weird balance there. They can't be.
Yeah, but then I would argue that the feature set, the functionality of Copilot for M365 in the enterprise is dramatically different from Copilot.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it's related not just to manageability, well, that's important, but also to security and data governance, and the ability to determine what data that your users can access while they're using the Copilot services, et cetera. So there's a lot of kind of management overhead, or just safety rails, however you want to say it. I mean, there are some obviously in the consumer product too, but enterprises will demand that. This is a non-starter unless you offer all of that stuff. And is that worth part of that chunk of change per user? Yeah, I mean, that's up to individual.
Yeah, I guess that was my question. I can see why enterprise might, it might be sticky for the enterprise, but less so for consumers. That's all.
So one of the little data points in this chart that Microsoft put out today, which is about the new chat for Microsoft 365, which is now available for free for the first time, and what the differences are between that and the paid version, is that you cannot limit the data set to your company's data unless you pay for it, right? You can't do that for free.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's one of them. There's only a couple, but and they're big ones, right? Most of the stuff, and there's only a couple really. When I say most, I mean like the other two are related to, in fact, I think that's one of them. Actually, that is one of them. So there's only a couple, and one of them is, or the others, or all of them are related to these agentic capabilities. So if you want an agent that's going to work on your behalf without you interacting with it, you actually have to pay for that, and it's a consumption-based thing. So it's a pay-as-you-go deal. And that's true whether you're paying for Copilot 365 or not. So I don't know what the justification is there, because they're never going to say this. Is this somehow more expensive for Microsoft, or is it because this thing always runs in the background and is there doing stuff on your behalf? I don't really know. Maybe they perceive it as such a valuable service. It's something they can charge for. They're just calculating that people will pay for this capability. I don't know.
Yeah, but they decided on charging that long before it was valuable at anything.
Yes, exactly. What are you telling me? If it tells me there's an iPad for 17 cents off, that's not valuable? Come on, Rich. Jeez. It's like,
dun, dun, dun.
I know it's.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure I can do that without a large language model.
I can do RAG, which is RAG. That's RAG, right? Mm-hmm. I could do RAG for free in a lot of these things.
Yes, but that, and this is going to be the push and pull. So,
maybe they don't guarantee privacy, or people trust Microsoft, and so they trust the brand.
I like that you said that without laughing out loud. By the way, I mean, some people do. I do too. I mean,
Well, yeah, because they have more. Look at OpenAI is not worried about its reputation or Perplexity or Claude or any of this stuff as much as Microsoft is. Right. They have a lot more to lose. Same with Apple. I think people go with those big brands for that reason. But I get a lot more out of, for instance, Perplexity AI. That's worth $20.
Interesting.
And it does a lot more. And I'm in ChatGPT using 4.0, the new reasoning model. So you say I could do that in Copilot, but how?
Do what? Sorry.
Use ChatGPT, the reasoning version, whatever it is, 401.
Yeah, so that's what came out today. So
what does it call it? How do I know that I'm doing that?
Oh, don't make me look this up. It's called I should. Sorry, it just came out today.
Ask the AI, because I like to use 001, right?
Yeah, and
when I'm on ChatGPT,
that's what they announced it, right?
Yeah, I can use 40 with scheduled tasks, which is new. I can 01 mini. I have a lot of models I can use. This is ChatGPT's interface.
This thing is called Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. That's the new name. This is the one that for the first time is available in a free tier as well as a paid tier. So before it was only paid.
I feel like they're missing the boat by calling it chat, because that sounds like it's about chat.
Well, we're going to.
It isn't.
Well,
that's just how you interact with the AI. Is you
Right.
type a question and it gives you an answer. That's not to me a chat bot. Something you converse with.
Okay, but just keep to Microsoft Word just to make it simple, right? So you've got this application that you write things with. Copilot is something that you could summon to do something specific. Summarize this document, rewrite this paragraph, whatever it is. It's also something that could happen automatically. You're doing
right.
This is something we'll talk about with the Copilot stuff for.
Apple Intelligence does that too.
GitHub.
You have some features that are built into the editor. Yeah.
So the chat interface, which is the thing, we have it in Windows. It's on the web. It's just the thing you bring up when you want to ask it questions and talk about. Yeah. So it's. It's bizarre, but it's a fact of, it's.
And you're saying when I use that, that's not 4, that's not 40, that's 401.
It is 40. Let me look it up. It's complicated.
I think there's more granularity in the ChatGPT world, even though I know we're using the same tools. I think the reason
the free one is ChatGPT 4.0.
Yeah, that's not the same.
4.0. Okay.
401 is the reasoning one. So you must have access to that. I don't know.
That's what I'm looking at right now. Yeah. So
it seems to me that the reason people do this is it's from Microsoft. It's trusted. It's integrated in. So I don't have to have a separate window.
Low friction.
The big use case, though, to me is going to be enterprises that want to limit the data set to ground the data in their corporate data.
Yeah.
Because that's where it can be helpful. There's a lot of Microsoft products that have kind of come and gone in the past where the net result is you're in a big organization and you have to find someone who's an expert on whatever the topic is so you can ask them a question or whatever. So you want to find someone who was involved in a previous initiative and find out what happened because now someone's asking about it again or whatever it is. You're looking for kind of corporate
the Dell
memory or
story.
Whatever, right? Yeah. So
yeah,
I think one of the big benefits, the thing I've been looking for the most, honestly, with Copilot, when they first announced Copilot, the first thing that went into my brain was I want to point this thing at my OneDrive where I have my document archive, and I want to be able to search and then find things, because right now I can tell you when I search for things, I don't find half of it. And that was really interesting to me. It kind of ground the AI. And I could ask you questions like, when did Microsoft release ... or whatever the thing is? Because that stuff's in there. Like the information's there. You just have to pull it out. And I think AI would be good at that. So I think that's part of the appeal, grounding the data in the corporate knowledge base, whatever that means, across their many data silos and the Microsoft graph and all that. I don't know. So yeah, that's why you would go with Microsoft. Plus OpenAI, my God, from the outside, doesn't it look like, you think Microsoft's chaos. OpenAI.
You can literally do that in every other AI that's out there.
Oh, yeah. So, right. So,
and you can do it privately because all of them have the checkbox or something. It says don't.
So let's say you stop paying for Microsoft 365, but you still have Word in your computer, or you might have Word because you bought Office 2019 one time. And you're like, I'm never buying this thing again, or whatever it is. So there's all these add-ons you can get for AI. If you want Grammarly or whatever for just, helping you rewrite things and all that, there's a million of these things. So is that big enough competition for Microsoft or Copilot or whatever right now? Probably not. Microsoft has withstood far bigger threats to Office than any of that stuff, but I think apathy is a big problem for them, and also just people just sticking with the old version and never paying them again. So it's like, great, we have this huge user base of Office, but what are they using? They're using a million different versions, and a lot of it's not even supported anymore.
Yeah. And oddly enough, works.
And still works. I know, which is the rub, right? This is the tough thing for Microsoft.
Yeah. You've got this. Somebody said in the chat that, you know what works fine? Office 2003.
Yeah, and Office 2003 was the first version where, like, I say, Outlook was worth a damn, and it started to get really interesting. And before they did the ribbon, right, which honestly I think worked out tremendously in the long run. But AI is just going to be everywhere.
Well,
That's
it was a way to manage a ridiculous amount of complexity in an application.
Yeah, and let alone a suite of applications. I think that the big problem for Microsoft here is going to be the same as it is for Office, which is just that AI is already basically everywhere, and it's not much of a value add because you just get it everywhere. You might have it on your Apple iPhone, and you'll look at Office and be like, "Why are you charging me for this? I get this for free right here. Why would I? What am I doing? Yeah. I don't care about that stuff." So it's a problem.
Well, and they are getting more efficient.
Yeah.
Right. Like the cost to Microsoft per user is also going down.
Yeah, I mean, it should, right? Well, but then their investment.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, just real quick. I mean, we know they're spending $80 billion on the fiscal year, but I would argue that's the little tip of the iceberg, because when you look at all the acquihires and partnerships and all the other stuff and the reorgs and bringing in, we'll talk about the organizational changes that are coming. I think the real cost of this is dramatically higher. And I'm just curious if Microsoft can afford it. They're one of the richest companies on earth.
Yeah, I was going to make exactly that point. It's not like they're borrowing the money.
No,
they would have otherwise used that cash for more stock buybacks. Instead, they're investing in infrastructure.
So is there a point where shareholders kind of say, we'd like to get some of that back directly if we could, or, I mean, there might be, right? Or is there some point where the board of directors finally wakes up?
This is where the energy of the hype comes from, is how do you keep the shareholders calm? By making this a worldwide hype.
I mean, they could have created another Zune Windows Phone and killed them again, and they still would have cost less than what they're spending on AI. So.
Less money.
It's kind of weird.
But I mean, admittedly, a lot of this money is in infrastructure. Like, it has a long-term asset value. It is buildings and servers.
$19 or $20 billion a quarter. It cost them $7.5 billion to get rid of Windows Phone and Nokia.
Yeah. I
mean, that's like 8 or 9 Nokias in a year. We thought that was a big deal when they did it the one time, now they're just gorging up this much money all the time. It's crazy.
It's an interesting space because on the one hand, it feels like the Wild West, and you would want to be in a more experimental mode, maybe feeling like the incumbents, Google, Apple, Microsoft, are probably too conservative with this stuff, and all the interesting stuff is going to be happening outside of them. On the other hand, it's so expensive that only Google, Apple, and Microsoft can afford to do it.
This was kind of my point at the very top of this, which is just that from the perspective of Microsoft's biggest and most important customers, they expect a conservative, slow-moving, change-averse organization. This has turned into a clown car of stupidity, change. I mean, it's crazy. We're only 2. Doesn't it feel like it's been 20 years? It's been going on for 2 years.
Oh, it's happening really fast.
It's unbelievable.
And that's why I just don't feel like the incumbents are going to be as nimble and as interesting as these little,
and yet they've outrun everybody.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft is trying their damnedest to break out of that trap.
They were smart because they did partner with a newbie. They partnered with OpenAI, and I think arguably still the forerunner in all of this.
Right.
Well, and I think they got lucky.
They got real lucky.
Kevin Scott saw an easy opportunity to get more Azure consumption, which was his mission. There was no expectation it was going to work until they presented him GPT-2, and then he wrote that email. Where he's like, okay, this looks like a thing.
It is a thing. I think we'll agree. I think we can all agree.
Yeah,
it's a thing. I don't know what it is, but it's a thing.
That's maybe the best way that's ever been put, because literally, I mean,
it's something.
It's like the screaming teacher in Back to School. He's like, because this guy's really passionate.
Do you remember?
I'll never know.
In the early days of the internet, it seems to me I had the same notion, kind of a sense that something here. Yeah. There's something huge here.
Something big is up.
I remember the first time I encountered it, I was on the Well, which was a text-based message system running on servers that were on top of Unix, which had access to the internet. And I found out there's a command you can drop out of the Well software into a command line, and you can use Archie and Gopher. It was really early days. But I was blown away because I got this sense of there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of stuff here. There's a global thing here that's kind of hidden. And this was probably 92, something like that, 91. So
I was,
but at the same time, you didn't. I don't know what it's going to be,
right?
When it grows up, but it's definitely a thing.
So all of us, because we're in the industry, have experienced this moment where this thing that's kind of constrained to our stupid little lives breaks out somehow, and normal people come to you and say things, and you're like, wait a minute, what? So I remember with the internet, one of the big things was just that everybody wanted it,
Yeah.
And it wasn't this.
This is 94 and 95.
Yeah. In the mid 90s,
know what it was.
It's just everybody got online. And then you kind of forget. It doesn't take long. A couple of years, you're like, I used to spend a lot of time on computers before they were online. I don't remember what the hell I was doing.
Yeah. What did I do?
It was just a big calculator.
Yeah. And the iPod was like that. I had a friend, non-technical. He said, he goes, I want to get an iPod. Does that make sense? And I was like, how do you even know this exists?
Right.
It was a big, it was a big thing.
But I have to say, there isn't the same sense. Like when the iPhone came out, we knew it was not only a thing, but we knew it was a big thing. We had a pretty good idea of what it meant and what it was going to be. I mean, it ended up being even more huge, but
yeah, even bigger.
There wasn't a surprise. The internet, kind of a surprise. I think AI is going to be the biggest surprise of all.
Yes. I think but for the same reason as the internet, it's just going to be everywhere. It's going to become a fact of life. We're going to forget what it was like before we had it.
Yeah.
And we all grew up in Star Trek movies or TV shows and movies. And those scenarios we always talk about that, he's sitting in the chair with this tablet and doing whatever he's doing. And, when are we going to have flying cars? This is kind of realizing a lot of it. Yeah.
I am now experimenting with always on AI. I'm wearing this thing that came at CES, the BEE, and I showed you the brilliant glasses that are make you look like you're a dork. I'm going to talk more about these next show on Twig. But I'm really interested in the idea of an AI assistant that is always on, always listening, and then this bee comes up with a to-do list for you.
I mean, Bill Gates was talking about this like 25 years ago.
Yeah. We've always thought there would be something like this.
This has been promised for so long.
I've got a to-do list that was created because this thing is always listening to all my conversations. And now some of it I'm going to...
And that's where the AR equation kind of comes in, is you kind of need that dash cam on your face.
Right.
So
there is another one I ordered that is a little glowing light you glue to your temple.
Oh, jeez, like a Borg.
That's a look.
But look, sleeker.
So this is all generated. I'll read it to you from conversations. Practice playing Jingle Bells on the piano, incorporating both hands and chords. that is like a checklist on my to-do. I didn't put it in. It heard me.
Yeah.
I think, and this is early days.
I like the transition here, by the way. We've spent the past 5 years being freaked out that everything we say in front of our phones is recorded and used to service ads and blah, blah, blah. And now you're like, oh, it made it for me. It's listening to me. Awesome.
I have no idea where this is going. It's probably going to China. I don't know. Who cares? It's working and it's doing something. For instance, yesterday, Lisa said, she told me verbally, I'm at breakfast, oh, don't forget to upload your tax documents. And she told me where to upload them.
And then you were like,
no, it put it in here as a to-do.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Because I would have forgotten. So it's very early days. This is, there's
the next
a lot
thing
of...
I will say is make sure you put the password for that account into this list.
Well, that's the problem.
So you'll never lose it.
That's the problem. I think that there's something here. And what I'm saying, I guess, is probably this is using OpenAI. I don't even know. They don't even tell you. But that's not the point.
Yeah.
It's the feature set, as you said. It's the feature set. It's how you use it that becomes interesting.
But this is why AI is an enhanced version, like I've called it MSG or whatever, of what we had before. Someone in the chat is saying, who cares where the info goes because it's so helpful, which, by the way, is this really naive way to look at that. But that is the relationship or agreement we've implicitly made with Google already. Everyone who uses Google Maps or whatever it is, uses it in part because, God, this thing is so helpful. I can't believe I ever drove between states or whatever without it. And you kind of know it's tracking you.
Of course it's tracking you.
Google has come to, so these are the two things that happened to me recently with Google Maps. I got in the car on a Friday, I put the phone up on the dashboard, not to do anything with it, just to put it up there. And this thing pops up and it says, it will take you 8 minutes to get to Notch, which is a restaurant we go to.
It knows that it's time to go to Notch.
Did not tell you I was going to Notch. I know how to get to Notch. That was a little weird. But the other one it's done, and I think I mentioned this on a previous show, is it's like boop boop. It says, "Hey Paul, we have a 17-minute gap on the 11th. Could you just fill it in and let us know what we were doing?"
I hate that.
It's like,
I turn that stuff off.
Wait a minute.
I don't want nobody to schedule me.
Yeah, that's the one where you're like, ah.
But there are some people who that would be useful. I mean, if you're a CEO, a really busy person.
No. What I mean is,
it's an assistant
tracking. It has a gap.
It knows
in understanding of what I did that day, and it would like me just to let it know.
Right.
It said, well, can we connect to Gmail and Google Calendar and Google Contacts? I said, yeah, sure. Just take it all. But now remember, I'm a perfect guinea pig for this because I'm on YouTube telling you everything about my life all the time anyway. So, I mean, obviously I don't have anything to hide, but
my life is nothing but
many
reaction videos of people watching the Van Halen Unchained video, which is just amazing. That's all I get on YouTube now. It's just different people watching the same video over and over again. It's fantastic.
They know what you like, Paul. They know.
I get it's why I go to Notch every Friday.
Hey, let me take a little break because it's time. And then, but we got more to talk about with AI, and there are some things going on at Microsoft. I see some layoffs happening and so forth. So let's talk more about that in just a little bit. You're watching Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott, Richard Campbell. And for many years now, Windows Weekly, in fact, you've heard me say it probably for many years, has been brought to you literally by Cashfly. Remember, bandwidth for Windows Weekly provided by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com. I just did an interview. He interviewed me, Matt Levine, the founder of Cashfly, just interviewed me. We did a great hour-and-a-half conversation. I think that podcast is coming out in a month. But I have this relationship with Cashfly is almost 20 years old. And it's funny because it was practically from the beginning of Cashfly. For over 20 years, Cashfly has held a track record for high-performing, ultra-reliable content delivery. They serve over 5,000 companies in over 80 countries. And since the beginning of Twit, almost 20 years ago, we've been using Cashfly to get our content, audio and video, to you. And I don't know if you've noticed, but it works pretty well. In fact, the fact that you don't notice is the key for me. It always works. It's smooth. It's easy. There are no problems, no hiccups. But if you really think what's happening, we do petabytes of data through Cashfly every month to hundreds of thousands of people. Audio and video, just kind of thoughtlessly streaming, downloading. It's amazing. Cashfly is the only CDN content delivery network built for throughput. They offer ultra-low latency video streaming. They can deliver video to over 1 million concurrent users with latency under a second. They offer lightning-fast gaming. If you're a gaming company, they deliver downloads faster for you with zero lag and glitches and outages during the online play. They can do, for anybody serving images on the internet, mobile content optimization. It automatically, transparently to you, optimizes your images for every size screen so your site loads faster on any device. The thing that made a difference to us almost 20 years ago when Matt Levine called and said, let me help you out, is they were very flexible with the billing, with the month-to-month billing, because we didn't know. Our traffic is very spiky on a Wednesday, and then it trickles off through the week, and then it's again on next Wednesday, and like that. And all our shows are like that. We had no idea. I don't want to pay for nonstop bandwidth at the peak, So they were very flexible. They worked with us, and they will work with you month-to-month billing as long as you need. Once you know what you need, and they will help you work that out, you can get a discount for a longer term. We were very long term. I think we're on a 15-year term. Design your contract. That's the key. And that was what was the key for us when you switched to Cashfly. Some new stuff they wanted to announce. They've got something called Managed Object Storage. This is a new object storage solution designed to increase speed and reliability to industry-leading levels. Why? Because the hardware is entirely based on NVMe. You know what it's really good for? People with a large number of small objects. Still completely S3 compatible. Did you even know they had this? Yeah, they'll easily migrate into your Cashfly MOS or S3 or any other tool set you've designed. By the way, Cashfly does not charge either for egress or ingress, which you can't say for some of the, have you ever seen your egress bill? Just a flat volume fee, and I really like that because it's predictable, right? They've just opened a new POP in Austria's capital city, Vienna, which means if you're listening to our shows in Central Europe, you're going to see significant improvements in latency and average transfer speed and all of that, and everybody benefits from that. Cashfly resellers will like this. There are quite a few of you I know. They've added some reseller features to the portal. You can now be classified as a reseller, which means you can have numerous full accounts under your reseller account, but each of them operate independently, billing centralized. I mean, there's just a lot of nice features because they very much think about what their customers need. They talk to you all the time, and they're very responsive. That's been our experience. Cashfly, they deliver rich media content up to 158% faster than other major CDNs. You could do what we've been doing for years, which is shield your site content in their cloud. When we upload shows, we don't upload it to our site and then cache it over to Cashfly. We store it all on Cashfly, which means we've got a 100% cache hit ratio. There's never a cache miss because they always have it. Oh, and I love this. The support is fantastic. With Cashfly's elite managed packages, you get the VIP treatment. You'll get a dedicated account manager who will be with you to support onboarding and a smooth implementation, and they'll be there 24/7, reliably helpful support when you need it. So learn how you can get your first month free at Cashfly, CACHEFLY.com/twit. It sounds more familiar if I say bandwidth for Windows Weekly is provided by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com/twit. Thank you, Cashfly, for making the entire Twit network possible. Frankly, without you, we just couldn't do it. All right, let's go on with Paul Thurrott, Richard Campbell. You're watching Windows Weekly. Looks like there's been some shuffling in Microsoft's AI groups.
Sometime in the first half of last year, remember Microsoft announced something called Microsoft AI, which was a new, not a division, right? I think they called it an organization.
It was a home for Suleiman.
Yeah, under Mustafa Suleiman, who was coming from Inflection. And then they basically hired almost everyone from Inflection, including their chief scientist, right? And it was confusing because at the time, we had just come out of that period where Sam Altman had been kind of ousted at OpenAI. A month went by, then he came back. They got rid of half the board. There was a whole churn.
Not a month, it was a week.
It felt like a million years.
It was a week of dark Satya, angry Satya,
So in the wake of that, they did this Microsoft AI organization. I think the conventional wisdom was that this was a response to that they needed to, not have all their eggs in one basket or whatever. And you're like, okay, well, it was weird that they hired people from outside the company. I think there were a lot of people inside Microsoft who were like, what's going on here? I know at least some people left. Remember there was that engineer who said, yeah, I don't want anything to do with this. I've been working on Copilot, whatever. In fact, I think it was the lead on Copilot left when this happened, it just felt out of step. So it's almost a year later, and they're doing it again. So there's two things that have happened this past week or so that may or may not be related, right? So the first is that Microsoft announced the creation of something called Core AI, Platform and Tools Division, which has similarities to that old Platform and Tools Division I remember from the old server Visual Studio days, early 2000s, which is led by someone who is not from Microsoft again. You're like, well, what's going on here? And what is this thing, right? And then there are separate reports. In fact, there are multiple reports. My phone was buzzing off the hook last night. I was getting texts from 3 different people about layoffs at Microsoft, including from one who's a former employee who had some kind of interesting details about that. And I don't know that these are completely related. And I've read through this announcement about this Core AI Platform and Tools Division several times. This is going to come up a lot on the show this year, me trying to figure out what Microsoft is saying and failing completely. I'm not 100% sure. Richard, I'm curious if you know anything about this or have any thoughts on this, because I just don't quite get what's happening.
I think they were due for a refocus on AI. I do certainly heard from various sources that if you're working on something, if you're a dev inside of Microsoft and you don't have AI related in your pipeline somewhere, you are in trouble. So make sure you're associated with all of that. The subtext of this particular announcement that was interesting to me was Scott Guthrie.
Right. Thank you. I literally, my heart skipped a beat for a second when I saw his name, and I thought, oh no. But he's a survivor, obviously, and he's been around for a long time. And I was nervous that this would be the beginning of some kind of a wind down for him, even though he is not an old man, I know, but
he's not, although he's been an EVP for a long time, but he was cloud, and then he was cloud and AI. And then, like you said, Mustafa showed up, and then there was another AI entity. So at that point, you're like, what's going on? And there was a schism. Maybe it's enterprise versus consumer, but they never really made that clear. Now the meta guy shows up, and they're like, okay, we're going to consolidate the AI group around that. They didn't really say, his cloud AI group is just going to be a cloud group. But clearly, when you see him writing about anything right now, he's writing about cloud.
That's right.
Like, he is responsible for growing Azure at the highest levels, right? Like, he's at the top, he's at EVP, he's top of the stack. So I think the growth pain in Azure, and there's pain, right? There's been some weird outages. It's not, what they're doing is crazy hard. They're renting 3 Mile Island,
which is just a headline from The Onion that never should have happened.
I like it when you say renting. That's a good, instead of recommissioning.
It's a weekend kid's birthday party or something.
It's a VRBO.
It's like, I got a bouncy house, but you're getting 3 Mile Island. It's the same thing. It's
nuclear power by owner. Yeah, I understand.
And I would like to buy 8 gigawatts of electricity, please, over 10 years. Can you hook me up? I know a guy.
Well, but when you think about like the constituent parts of this new, actually, division, right? I think they call it a division. Yeah. So it's not a nebulous organization. It's a division, and they're going to combine what used to be DevDiv, AI platform, and then some parts of Office. Office of the CTO, which is Kevin Turner, right? He was doing. Kevin Scott. Sorry. Jeez, Kevin Turner. Yeah, speaking of the early 2000s. AI supercomputer, agentic runtimes, and engineering thrive. God, did God work on the brands. And then the mission is to build end-to-end Copilot and AI stack for both. This is the fascinating part. For both first and third-party customers to build and run on with AI apps and agents. I read that and I think to myself, okay, what about .NET? What about Visual Studio, which, by the way, has not gotten a major upgrade since the 18th century or whenever it was, a long time ago?
No. Well, and you notice Julia Lucens in that loop, and that ultimately, she's the head of DevDiv. So, and I think there's a quote from Amanda Silver, who's really her right hand. And really in charge of Studio. But you're right, like Studio still sells annual licenses, right? Like, they haven't really switched over to the new model. They've certainly got a Copilot product, like they're in there. But I don't know that Julia Lucens had a new person to report to than Scott Guthrie in a decade.
That's incredible. Yeah. When you talk about that conservative, slow-moving, whatever, Microsoft, that part of the company was that, predictable, reliable. I don't mean that in a negative way.
The vast majority of Visual Studio customers are last year's Visual Studio customers, right? Like it's a subscription model for a reason. Big enterprises use it. I don't know that they have much of a plan to acquire new customers.
I mean, somebody just today asked me, when is there going to be a next major rev of Visual Studio? And it's like, I don't know that. I'm not sure there will be.
They are due.
Yeah. Oh, they're overdue.
Like, it was 2019. There was a 2022. So logically, there should be a 2025. And I'm saying that because I know.
No, and I want to be. Yeah,
if I knew, I would say.
What I mean, I guess what I mean by a major rev is not just calling it something different, which is due, but.
No. Studio gets a quarterly update. There's lots of features being added. Like, it's not like it's a dead product.
No, not at all. But I don't know. I'm just, if we're moving to this kind of AI agentic future, are there better tools, different tools for that kind of stuff? And does this stuff just go forward as almost a legacy something? Like
one would argue that's already true with Visual Studio Code.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the many things this past year, go back to build, Microsoft announced something called the Windows Copilot runtime, which is hilarious because it's no runtime. And the core part of that, which I think of it as that, is the Windows Copilot library, which is a set of APIs, or will be, because none of them have been released, not one of them. And that is amazing to me. If you look at .NET or just at Azure, right, there are many APIs related to cloud and to AI capabilities. Most of those run against the cloud, right? The Windows Copilot runtime stuff is supposed to run against the MPU, which hasn't turned into a big market, frankly. And those things haven't appeared. So .NET plays a role in AI, and hopefully it's a role. Actually, you would know this. So I assume, let me just ask you, what is the biggest audience base, for lack of a better term, the biggest use case or whatever for .NET in the world? Like what's .NET used for mostly?
Internal corporate apps.
Like apps, like actual apps.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And usually back-end parts, although with Blazor being ascendant, you're seeing more and more like old web forms apps being replaced as Blazor apps. But the vast majority of .NET apps are behind corporate firewalls. To millions.
So I guess there is an audience out there of customers who may want to either modernize existing apps or create new apps in .NET.
It's a constant pressure. And it's also, the folks I know inside DevDiv, like these are the conversations they're having every week. Right? How do I move you off these older tech? How do I get you into mobile in a useful way? How do I open LLMs as a door? Right? Like the .NET Rocks. How many of these shows have we already done? A ton of them. But and by the way, like the Windows Copilot runtime is funny. It's just a grab.
I was going to say, I hope you mean funny in the right sense, and you do. It is funny. It's ludicrous.
They had to put a wrapper over top. Where does Silica live? Right, and where does Recall live? Like that. And that's what it really is. It's just a wrapper over a bunch of stuff. So there's some sense of overall product management on it, which
they should have called it the AI grab bag. That would have been a more appropriate name.
Well, it's because it's fairer, right? And by the way, not everything ML.NET is not in this list, right? So it's not like they've got everything.
Yeah, I'd have to go look at it, but I assume nothing from .NET is in this list. Well, maybe that's not true. I don't know. I feel like it would just be separate, right?
Yeah. In the end, imaging APIs are part of App SDK, which has always been associated with .NET. Yeah. There's plenty of stuff that's in there. But it's it's an extension really of the WinApp API, SDKs, adding more of these newer technologies. But you definitely see this again. Conway's applies. What teams played ball? What teams didn't?
Interesting.
When sort of package this thing up, and that's still going on. Like I said, I'm very interested to see how someone like Julia has a new boss and how that rolls down to the rest of the organization. Because, and I'm not saying that in a good or bad way in any respect. Some respect, I have worried about Studio for a long time. I feel like it
doesn't get enough attention. I think
focus on the future.
Yep.
Well, to just not get
maybe the right attention is the way to say it.
Well, you know what I like about a month when you look at these products that have switched over to these monthly models, and on Office 3 and M65 is a great example of this. It's that they can keep adding new features and watch people use them routinely, and then they can associate revenue with those things. Like you're starting to see GitHub Enterprise have more subscription options for things that people want, and there's no better bet than people buy it. So, but there's no, as long as you're selling Studio on an annual subscription license, how do you ever know if the customer is affected in any way?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, this is,
anyway, these are, as the .NET Rocks guy, I care about this stuff a lot.
Yeah, you should. And that's why I wanted to ask you about it. Because I care about it too. I don't have as much of a presence in this game or whatever, but I use Visual Studio every single day.
Well, and 2 summers ago, I shot a video series with the Microsoft Studio team talking about all of the things in Studio, right? Like talking about the best debugger in the world. Like people, we forget. Like it was I felt like all I was doing was reminding people of things they already know.
Well, that's
truly
that was the problem for Microsoft Office for 20 years. The top 90% of feature requests were things that were already in the product.
Yeah. No, it's a client. Kathleen Dollar does this talk where she's showing features in Studio, and people are like, "Oh my God, when did that come in?" It's like 10 years ago. You just didn't know it was there.
That's funny. We're going to talk a little bit more about Visual Studio. Yeah, Visual Studio later. But this has been top of mind for me. So
it's a big reorg. It's important. I'm excited to see what comes next. Like, there's going to be some layoffs, but I think I also believe that Microsoft's now in a pattern like most tech companies where it's like keeping your employees vaguely afraid of their jobs stops them from organizing.
So, yeah, I mean, the text messages that I was exchanging last night were very alarmist. And there was this indication that a lot of it was at sort of the PM level of the of each organization, that it wasn't like the layoffs, that is. Like, it wasn't about specific parts of the company. It was kind of like everywhere, but little, like relatively small from a total headcount perspective.
It's a 2 or 3%er, right? Like, they're just sort of taking a little raft through. And, you know, it's typical of Microsoft. I haven't checked this. I'd have to go see. They're probably being 90-dayed.
Yeah.
Which basically says you have your wages
out. Figure out, like,
you've got 90 days to go find a new role inside the company.
So,
and if you don't, then you're
GeekWire has written about this. Business Insider has written about it. I think it was Business Insider got a quote from a company spokesperson who said, "We focus on high performance talent. We're always trying to help people learn and grow. When they're not performing, we take appropriate action." Yay. Hello. I mean,
and there's a very specific, you know, sort of course of action when you have someone who's underperforming significantly, when they keep scoring fives. Yeah. But it's a long path to getting fired for cause.
Oh my God. Yeah. I would hope so. I mean, yeah.
But these layoffs are not that, right? This is a workaround.
Yeah. I mean, again, I would never downplay any layoffs. I'm not making light of anyone losing their job or anything like that.
It's a big deal to the people that are being affected. But, you know, there's another side of this, which I've been abundantly aware of since this new behavior in the past 5 years, which is the labor lawyers are circling.
Yeah. Well,
and they're looking for bad behavior.
You made the point earlier, which I think it is related to this very, very precisely, which is we're doing AI. Okay. Everyone on board? No? Oh, then you can leave.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Oh, everyone's good. Good. And then every once in a while they come back and say, "Hey, we're serious about doing AI. We're so serious, we're actually reorging around it now. So I want to make sure everyone on board." "Oh, you're not, Bob? Okay, Bob, you can leave." "Anyone else?" You know, like, we kind of go through this.
I mean, I would also argue we forget how often Gates reorganized when he was leading the company.
Yeah.
Like, it was almost a joke.
It was
you could rarely get through a year, but it was his approach to not allowing empires to be built. Like, it was impossible. And one of the reasons this reorg is such a big deal is because it's been a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I think they've been a little hyper focused on other things. I don't think it's any strategy or whatever, but yeah.
But you feel like in the past 2-3 years, as Satya jumped on the AI train, he's been gathering assets. This is the first time he's trying to put them into a box.
Okay. It makes me a little nervous. I'm change averse myself, so I kind of get that, but it makes me a little nervous.
No, and believe me, I got a few calls, and I'm like, look, you're working on the right thing. You're going to be okay.
Yeah, right. You hear this is happening. You look at your job title or whatever, and you're like, "No, I got AI in there. I'm good." And then just to
Copilot is the word you're looking for. If it says Copilot in your
you're the something of Copilot something. Yeah, no, you're good. Just two really quick things. OpenAI last night announced a new tasks feature for ChatGPT that is sort of bringing it to this, Siri style, personal assistant kind of functionality. It's beta. It's the feature's a little different depending on what client you're using. You're limited to 10 tasks active at one time. But this is that kind of agentic capability where you kind of wind the thing up and say, "Go forth into the world and act on my behalf." And their examples are silly. My daughter would like to hear a story when she goes to bed about whatever. Please remind me to come up with a stupid story every night. Something like that. Like, okay, that's cute. But, they're trying to turn this thing into more of a general purpose tool for the normies, I guess. And then the other one, and there's only one appropriate response to this headline, which is Microsoft Excel in Windows now supports dark mode. I
what?
Just didn't already. What? Like, what are you talking about? I should say in beta. They're testing it. It's in the Insider program, but it was coming to the app soon. Okay. I don't use Excel. I don't use most of Office these days, but Word would be the big one for me. And obviously Word has supported dark mode for, I don't know, several years to some degree. I don't know.
I'm looking at my Excel right now. It's in dark mode.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's happening there. I don't know what this.
I don't know
But that's it reads like another Onion headline. Like seizing the day, Excel has finally decided to. I guess we're calling it proper dark mode support.
So there's an improper dark mode. Excellent. There's been Office themes for 15 years.
There you go.
Right. So okay.
Like I said, did someone screw up the date on this thing? It was just actually from 2005. I don't know, but
is it April 1st?
It's a little bizarre.
Are you a little early?
Well, I don't want to be dark or anything, but maybe we should just stop for a moment, take a breath, because I want to plug something. It won't be long. Just a brief mention that we are doing our yearly survey. We'd like to know more about you. It's an easy few minutes. We just basically are asking questions about you, but we aren't going to ever use them as individuals. We want to know our audience in aggregate. Twit.tv/survey. We've done this every year. We usually get around 10,000 responses, and that's very helpful for us because we know then it's at least somewhat statistically valuable. If you can, twit.tv/survey. We do it for two reasons. One, to get to know you better, helps us, tailor our programming towards your interests. But two, and I'll be absolutely forthright about this, we also use it with advertisers. They often want to know, well, do IT decision makers listen to the show? And it's really helpful when we can say, according to our survey, 10,000 people, 75% of them said, yes, we're IT decision makers. That's the kind of thing that really helps us. So if you want to help us, of course, join the club. But the second free way to do it is take the survey once a year. Twit.tv/survey. Thank you in advance. We're done with AI and dark mode Excel, right? Okay. Let's move on then to hardware. There's going to be an announcement at the end of the month.
Hey.
You're muted, Paul. All right. I did that out of respect for you.
Thank you for all the respect. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And then I have short-term memory loss. So those two things combined bring you what you see and hear today.
Nothing like that. Alzheimer's respect.
Yeah.
So hardware.
Who are you, young man? You look interesting.
Are you my son?
Yeah, exactly. Wilson? So Surface teased an announcement for businesses on January 30th. I mean, last year was kind of weird for Surface because in March they announced the new Surface Pro and laptop for business running Meteor Lake chips, right? And then they did the Qualcomm Snapdragon X versions they announced in May, released in June. Lunar Lake has come out since. So yeah, I guess that could be part of it, even though it's been, 9-10 months, whatever. But actually there is one machine that I can think of that is a current concern for Surface that maybe needs to be updated. And that's Richard's computer, the Surface Laptop Studio, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Studio
maybe it's time to turn that into a proper Copilot plus PC, a kind of portable, almost workstation class machine, right, with dedicated graphics and so forth.
And by turn into, you mean
that's what I meant. But no, I mean, I assume you'll probably use it for a while. But it's, but yeah, I mean, the timing on that was kind of interesting because if I remember correctly, it must have been October, November 2023-ish. And then Microsoft and Intel did the AI. Oh no, I guess it would have, technically AI PC. It was an AI PC, obviously it is an NPU. It's unique because it's technically a desktop chip, but it has if it isn't, whatever, it doesn't matter, but it has an external NPU. And then they did Meteor Lake, which integrates it into the chip, but it's not Copilot plus PC class. And now they have Lunar Lake, which is, and a bunch of other chips that are not. So Intel's fun. Maybe it will be AMD based. That might even be better. Yeah, that would be kind of interesting. They have done AMD Surface models here and there. The Surface laptop was available in AMD for a while, for example. And I don't think it's going to be a Snapdragon or anything. I mean, just based on where they are in the product cycle, it's not like they have some exciting new design. If they came up with like a base model Snapdragon something that like whatever, okay. I mean, that's not particularly exciting. So we'll see. But I don't know anything about what they're going to announce. And then speaking of AMD, so AMD and Intel both announced hundreds, it seems, of chip models at CES. One of the companies got a lot of really good press, And the other one we just kind of feel sad about. We're kind of tired of talking about. And there was some really interesting language, like PC World referred to the Arrow Lake chips that Intel put out as, and I'm quoting, crappy. Whereas AMD cannot.
Is that a technical term?
It has to do with the speed of the NPU, but it's AMD can't make enough of the chips that they just announced. Like they're literally going to have to ramp up production by some order of magnitude that they did not anticipate, which they should have, because when in December I got to see HP and some other things, but HP was using the same chip, technically a mobile chip, in a laptop, which is essentially a thin and light kind of workstation, portable workstation, but also in a modular, gorgeous desktop workstation. That's how powerful these things are. Obviously, the desktop version you compare with discrete graphics, but the integrated graphics in these X3D class chips, as they call them, the kind of higher end version of the Zen 5 chips, are astonishingly good. And there's some nexus or kind of wonderful coincidence of things happening at once, where Intel is kind of hobbled right now. AMD is hitting on all cylinders, and PC makers are finally looking at and implementing AMD versions of devices where they hadn't before. Like Dell is doing commercial PCs with AMD for the first time.
Yeah, and as their flagship machines too.
Oh yeah, no, these are the good ones.
This is the fastest workstation we're making.
Like one of the kind of non-scientific tests I've been doing, because for science, is testing Call of Duty on all these different laptops with integrated graphics, right? And I mean, someone has to do it. And by far the best one that I have is that AMD 9 series. It's not 3DX or X3D. Obviously, those just came up, but whatever the highest end version was they had before is so much better than everything else with integrated graphics that it's almost, I would say it literally isn't a class by itself. So for example, with a Lunar Lake laptop running at, 2.8K, like 2800 by whatever the resolution is. So much higher than full HD, 40 frames a second, pretty much all the graphics set to low, very low. But with this AMD chip at 2800, 2.8K roughly, or whatever the resolution is, full res, and all the graphics settings set to high or very high, 120 frames a second. I mean, it's not even close. It's astonishing.
Wow.
So it's nice to see a company like this be rewarded for doing something right. And of course, AMD's trying to be nice. They don't cause a lot of waves, frankly. AMD's, in fact, if anything, I wish AMD would be more aggressive. But they've, come out and said, we have this competitor, and they coughed up a hairball, and we're here. So nice,
Have you considered?
Actually, what he said was, we did know that what we made was awesome. What we didn't know is that this competitor built a horrible chip. So the delta between those two things was greater than they anticipated. They sort of expected that Intel would show up to some degree. So kind of interesting. So I'd like to see that happen. On the opposite side of the spectrum, I don't understand this one, but the former designer from Surface, Ralph, I'm probably going to pronounce his name wrong, but Ralph Groen, I guess. I always think of Matt Groening from The Simpsons when I see his name, but super nice guy. My understanding is he did a lot of the product design, like the actual form factor stuff, like Stevie Batish would have worked on more technical, hinge designs and more technical things related to screens and AI eventually, actually.
Panos seems to be getting the whole team.
Yeah, well, so he's joined Panos Panay at Amazon Devices and Services, right? So I have some questions here, because this is not a business that has a lot of resources and doesn't make anything that doesn't look like cheap plastic crap. So I'm kind of curious.
Maybe they want to look better.
But someone on some social network said what you just said, which is that Panos is getting the band back together. And I said, except they're playing bar mitzvahs and elementary school recitals. Like it's not. You're not going to have the same budget, and you're not going to have the same premium device kind of vibe.
Amazon's got the money if they want to experiment with a new product.
But that's the thing. I mean, this is the part of the company that a year ago, a year ago, said, we've been losing billions on this business. So it doesn't make any money. So I just don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm curious why he went. I'm curious what they're doing, obviously, but
I think he went for the right amount of money, but the most likely thing is that Panos is making something cool and he needs his help.
I hope that's true, I guess, but I don't know. We'll see.
Look, they need to revamp that line big time.
I just bought a Fire HD 8 tablet just to kind of reacquaint myself with this little piece of crap, which I instantly returned. It's terrible. Yeah. And people will say things like, well,
it's cheap though.
It's not as, it sucks, but it's cheap. And I get that.
Now I use them on the wall with Home Assistant because I run kiosk on them. So you don't use any of their software. You block them from updating themselves so they don't get screwed up.
I find it to be borderline insulting, this device. It's just, I don't know. I don't mind it. I mean, look, I want to embrace the whole low cost thing. I'm not like an elitist or anything.
Yeah, but ecosystems are not for the weak, right? And it's just hard for most people to understand how to make an ecosystem.
So we've talked a lot about ARM and Qualcomm and that whole legal battle. There's more and more information coming out. This past week, there was a report from Reuters that shed a bit more light on ARM's plans, which were divulged during the trial, but redacted in the documentation that came out afterwards, to do things like create their own chip manufacture. No, they don't. I don't mean manufacture directly, like obviously TSMC or whatever would do this, but design chips that would actually be sold to like end user companies like Samsung or whomever, instead of selling them to other companies that will then design chips off of that design, like Apple. Well, Apple doesn't sell them, but Apple does that. Qualcomm does that. Samsung probably does that. Okay. And that's interesting. And there's some internal stuff where, it's just like during the Microsoft trial in the late 90s, early 2000s, they came off poorly, but I don't really view that kind of stuff as whatever. Companies compete, people talk plainly when they're speaking privately, in this case, not email, but over Teams because it's 20 years later, but whatever. So when the CEO of ARM Holdings says of Qualcomm, they are hosed, I just smile and think that's cute. But here's, I feel like ARM was in the wrong for what they did with Qualcomm. I know that Qualcomm came out ahead in the legal battle, but I feel literally that in that relationship, ARM miscalculated. It was a mistake. But I'm going to defend ARM a little bit here because one of their plans, which we already kind of knew, right, is that they're raising the prices on the chip design licenses that they sell to licensees. Companies like Apple and Qualcomm, which are off doing their own thing, have stopped licensing new things. So they're not paying higher license fees, which is one of the problems, right? That was one of the reasons they were trying to get Qualcomm to pay more. They just don't pay a lot. So according to Reuters, there is a plan to grow their revenues from chip design licenses by 300% over 10 years. And this has unleashed an incredible tirade of criticism in my side anyway, against this company. And I got to say, the one thing that's come up a bunch with, especially since ARM has gone public, is that ARM runs every computing device on the planet. It is the architecture behind everything, from the smallest IoT devices to all the mobile devices, smartphones, tablets, whatever, now in PCs, but also data center, AI, whatever. Somehow, the company that designs the underlying chip is the smallest part of this entire thing by far.
Sure. Yeah, but
great profit margin, but it's understandable that their parent company, essentially SoftBank, owns, 90 or 95% of them, whatever it is, wants them to grow revenues, right? And so there are different ways to do that. But one of them is like, just charge more for these things. You should get more for this work you're doing. I got to say, that I think there's a compelling evidence that that's true. You just like, I don't remember the exact number, but I know that Qualcomm earns 10 times as many revenues as ARM does. I think Apple, if I'm getting this is a Reuters number, but I think they said like 90 times. I mean, look, I'm not saying they should make as much, but
there's difference between design and implementation. But if you don't like it, use a different design.
Well, people are like, well, I guess we're switching. I'll switch it to RISC-V now, and it's like, settle down, just settle down.
There you go.
It's like, hold on a second, we're fine, it's okay.
I mean, there is a point where it's too expensive and it's worth pricing an alternative.
No, we're not at that point. I mean, I don't know. Look, there's some crappy stuff that this company did. They lied to Samsung about Qualcomm's license for their chip designs, which caused Samsung to actually cut back their contract with Qualcomm because they thought it was going to disappear. And then the CEO of Qualcomm got up on the stand during the trial and said, no, we have a license through 2033. This isn't expiring in a year or two. We have a license for a while. So there's stuff like that. And certainly I would be critical of ARM for that. But as far as like this being the architecture of the present/future and it being, like I said, one of the smaller players in the market that it supposedly created and or controls. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe they should get more money. I'm not saying that. I mean, I feel like the right thing happened in the Qualcomm trial, but maybe they deserve to, or whatever, or can charge more for their own designs. And maybe they do start selling chips directly. That could happen. That's okay. And not a big deal, but there is a 16 gigabyte Raspberry Pi 5 now. So this was the device that got delayed because of the pandemic and then was finally released. I'm not going to get this exactly right, but I want to say probably 4 and 8 gigabyte versions at first. And then this past fall, summer, they released a 2 gigabyte for the low end. And now they have a 16 gigabyte, which, stepping on low end PC territory here. Not even low end, really, with 16 gigs.
It's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If you want to get like what they now call an N100 or N1 2000 based NUC, this is what used to be Pentium or Celeron or whatever, or a 12th gen Intel Core I'm going to probably 5, it's only like $200 to $300. And once you add the storage, the case, and whatever else you would need for a Raspberry Pi, these things are kind of the same price.
They're comparable price.
I know they serve slightly different markets, but I think a lot of people look at this thing and think this would be a really cool entry-level computer. If Microsoft would just bring full Windows 11 to this, that would be kind of interesting.
They used to ship with Windows.
Windows 11,
but it wasn't full. It wasn't full.
It was like a special. It was
almost
version.
like an IoT version. Yeah. So what you could do, you had a dashboard and you could run one app, and the idea was it was going to be like a kiosk type thing. So you have this little Raspberry Pi and it runs a.
I had it because it ran. First of all, I ran my Minecraft server on it. Yeah. But also it ran a modified version of Minecraft that you could code with Python.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
I love that this exists. The Raspberry Pi to me is what computing was. Like back when personal computers used to be called home computers. Yeah. And it was 8-bit. It was Atari, Apple, TI, Commodore, whatever. And there was a whole enthusiast movement. And every one of them came with BASIC and people were writing their own programs. A lot of kids didn't have a way to save those. So they put them on paper and then type them in again the next day, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is the closest we can get to that era now, Yeah,
it's just 16
you could write an
instead
app
of 16K.
in Swift Playgrounds and an iPad, publish it to the store, and be out in the world with a product. People aren't building little enthusiast pieces, except they are because of Raspberry Pi. It's kind of awesome. Like I think it's
that's what it is. Yeah, and it does have that
I think
community around it. And they go in all kinds of directions. All the hardware shields,
like cheap AI accelerators. Again, not quite Copilot PC class, but up to like Meteor Lake class for sure. Like probably $50 or something. Like it's hilarious.
This NUC that you mentioned here, it's pretty amazing, right? For $229.
Yeah. That's not that old. Like I just this past week alone, because I've been kind of winding down here with whatever computers I have, I brought up a bunch of 12th gen laptops with very similar specs, by the way. 16 gigs RAM, very standard for that. Whatever size drive, SSD. Like that is not a horrible computer.
Not horrible. I mean,
no, for $229,
it's amazing.
I know, it's crazy. That's pretty good.
I might even just go out and buy one.
Yeah.
At least compare it.
Now, I should say the one caveat to that. This is N200. So this is not Core i something, right? This is Celeron.
It's like an Atom kind of thing.
Pentium. Right? Yeah, it's in that class. But still, for $229, as far like little enthusiast computer, kind of if you think of it as a kind of a Raspberry Pi like computer, not bad. Not bad.
You can get it for $189.
Yeah, well, that's N100, right? So that's the previous gen.
That one you're looking at was that chipset was released in 2023.
Yeah, but it's old. It's old. It's
200.
It's a crap older.
That's what
you're saying.
It's the low end. It's not. It's
How about the
below
N5105? Is that 11th gen?
I bet that's closer.
That's
to
a core processor.
It's
Yeah.
older.
Yeah.
It's
So it's 11th gen, which is, it's fine. I arguably, because of the shift to the Core Ultra platform, I mean the 11th, 12th, I think there was a 13th, if I remember. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there would have been. That's kind of the apex, if you will, for the old stuff. I know, pre-NPU stuff, I guess.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was such inexpensive NUCs out there.
Yeah.
I think people buy Raspberry Pis for other reasons, but
$1,000.
honestly, you're right.
You can put a fun little case on it, give it as a gift. There's all these little things you can do with it. I bet a lot of them are single use.
My eldest daughter just asked for a Pi hole, actually.
That's a perfect use for it.
Yeah, she was
Are
over
you
at
going
the
to
house and
configure
she
it
just
for her
noticed
and
how things were working? It's like,
get it all set up and like that?
Just
give me a Pi hole, Daddy.
Yeah, just plug it into the network, change the router
a sentence that would never come out of my daughter's mouth.
For many reasons.
She's like, does it have iMessage on it?
But you don't. But so you connect. So you connect this inside or outside the router.
It's an outside device, but it's just it's basically.
So you connect
it. Just sits between the router and the rest of the world, basically.
So you connect the Comcast to this, and the router comes out.
Or
no.
I guess it would sit. Does it sit in front of the
Pi hole would be on
the router? It must be before the router.
Inside.
So,
okay.
From the
so the router goes into
to
this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. But there's only one Ethernet jack on it.
It's just a network device on the network.
Oh,
that is the
it's just,
so you're not passing stuff.
It's not a physical chain, although I guess it could be. Right?
No, it is. It effectively is, because when you now tell your router to whatever address, it says, hey, when I say DNS, use the internal DNS. The internal DNS. Then does
this becomes your DNS server.
That's right.
Got it. And it's pretty fast.
Fast enough.
Yeah.
It's all local networks, not that much traffic on it. But the thing that's great about the Pi hole solution is when your television goes to go grab ads,
right,
you can't run ad block.
That's the one thing I don't. I don't do that here. I put NextDNS on my portable device,
which is roughly the same. I think you're using them as
I mean, it's a external DNS, whatever, but it's it's fine. I don't put it on my computers. Part of it is just I kind of need to see what terrible things Microsoft.
But you can run NextDNS as your router's DNS provider, and then it's the whole network. Same as it would be.
I could, but I don't. But I don't on purpose. There's enough that on the mobile devices that doesn't work, where it's like I don't think I want to introduce this to the house. Exactly. Right. Although I do like the idea of it.
I don't do it because Lisa says, "What are you blocking ads for? We're an ad-supported network, right?"
Yeah, but our ads aren't the ones going out through the thing.
Knock it off. Well, she says, "I want to see the ads. I want to hear the ads. Don't block the ads." I said, "Fine."
Wow.
Fine.
And that's the upside of the Pi hole is I can configure for these domains, for these things.
Right. Right. Yeah. You can do that with NextDNS as well. You can even do it granularly by machine.
I have to put my comment system on the whitelist, for example.
But then I come out into Mexico and I get inundated with conventional ad on websites. And it's like, how do you use these web pages? Like they're not functional.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
same thing with YouTube. Once you're used to an ad-free version,
oh my God, you could never stop paying for YouTube once you've used it. Yeah. YouTube's maybe the best example of that.
Yeah.
So actually, that segues very nicely into a discussion of our plan to eliminate all advertising on the Twit Podcast Network. It's not going that well yet, but but maybe with your help, it could. We've created, as many podcasts have, a membership club, right? We call it Club Twit. And the idea is we can replace ads with subscription fees. Now, I don't ever want to do a paywall. I really think it's important that all our content is available for free to anybody who wants it. So we're going to keep doing ad-supported shows. But I also think it would be really nice for the support to come from our audience. Right now, it's about 1.5%, almost 2% of our audience that has joined Club Twit. I'd like to get that to 5%. And honestly, that could replace all the ad revenue, even if 1 in 20 subscribed. It's not expensive. We keep the price low because we want everybody to be in the club. $7 a month. You get ad-free versions of all the shows, obviously, because you don't have to because you're paying. But you also get additional content that we don't put out in public. For instance, Paul's Hands on Windows is available to the public as an audio show. It's a great show. If you want video, join the club. You'll get video as well. Same with Hands on Macintosh, Hands on Tech is going that way. We're going to do iOS Today, I think, that way. So that's one thing. We also do stuff like the book club. Stacy's book club's coming up. There are 2 days left to vote. It is really close. It's neck and neck between Orbital, which a number of people have said, please don't let it be. Please don't let it be Orbital. Apparently, it's a little slow moving. Right now, Orbital's winning, but it's only winning by 2 votes. So if you're a club member, get into Stacy's book club section and cast your vote. There's also Micah's Crafting Corner coming up tonight at 6. It's just a chill hang with Micah as he does his craft, which I think lately is building these little tiny rooms. But you can do anything you want alongside of it. Maybe I'll practice. Oh, maybe I'll join practice my piano. I can play a little piano music for the Crafting Corner. Home Theater Geeks is coming up. Photo time with Chris Marquardt. The new adjective is luminous. There's just a lot of stuff going on in the club. Then, of course, there's the Club Twit Discord, which is a place for all the club members to hang out and talk about the things that interest geeks during the shows, but also not during the shows. There's always, yes, that's you, Patrick. So there's always fun stuff going on. Actually, that's us. Join the club, everybody. Steve Ballmer says, club members. Twit.tv/clubtwit. We will be very happy to have you and welcome you into the club. Twit.tv/clubtwit. I just want to find the Stacy's book club thing. See all these other discussions that are going on. I can never find, though, the one I want. Anyway, somewhere in here, there's the Stacy's book club. Look in the announcements channel to see how the book club is going, says Wojo. Thank you, Wojo, but I don't see it here. That's why I'm confused. Maybe I'm in the wrong spot. Oh, announcements. Thank you. There we go. It's really close. 31 votes for Those Beyond the Wall by Micaiah Johnson and 35 votes for Orbital by Samantha Harvey. And the other 2 are lagging behind. But if you like Hum or The Practice, The Horizon, and The Chain, vote for those. And then in 3 more days, we're going to know, and we'll do that in the Stacy's book club. So just, as an example, there's some fun stuff going on. Twit.tv/clubtwit. Don't you want to be in the club? I know you want to be in the club. Join the club. We would love to have you. On we go with the show. What is next? I have lost track.
.NET 9.01.
Yeah.
.NET. Of course, it's .NET is next.
I spent a
just fade away into the bushes right now.
It's better to fade out than no. So I spent a big chunk of last year working on this update to my .NET Pad app for .NET 9. Wasted a better part of a month thinking I was making a mistake, and then found out actually there is a bug in .NET 9 that causes apps to crash if you use an expander control and try to change the theme to match.
You mentioned that last week. Yeah,
this was infuriating to me because, like I said, I wasted time on this. And my code was fine. It was Microsoft's code that was broken. So in the end, I decided knowing they would fix it because they said they did internally, but not sure when they would fix it. I put my app up on GitHub and said, look, just don't do this thing that crashes it, and then it will be fixed. And so last night I saw they announced .NET 9.0.1, and I thought, oh, this must be that fix. And I scoured all of their documentation. It's not a single mention of this, but I said, screw it, I'll just install it. And sure enough, it does fix it. So I updated the app, got rid of the workaround I had in there. And it only took 2 months, bastards. But yeah, that's fine. Unrelated to that, but sort of related.
By the way, this is why you have to code, Paul, so you can live in the world that developers live in where you've got a tear your hair out bug and it's not your fault. That's a good thing.
I was looking for something that was even more aggravating than being an IT pro, and I think I found it.
You found it.
And less fulfilling. No, it's actually pretty fulfilling. So ever since, well, not ever since they announced it, but for the past year or two, whatever, I've wanted to try GitHub Copilot, the original Copilot, right? And I always figured at some point with this project that I would use it, if only to do some sort of a code review, code quality review, like point like a method at it and say, could this thing be more efficient or written in a cleaner fashion or whatever, not ever having used it. So I have not written this up yet. I just experienced this, I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before, but I think it was yesterday. Back in December, they made a free tier of GitHub Copilot. So you can actually use this for free. It works a lot like that thing we were talking earlier, where you get a certain amount of credits every month. And then, you can do a certain number of code completions, a certain number of chat interactions, et cetera. And if you keep using it and you find you're running into the limits, you can just pay for GitHub Copilot. So I was like, okay, this is not going to hurt me to try this. So I should try this. I want to be super clear about this because it's going to sound like an exaggeration. This might be literally black magic. I have never, especially in the scope of AI, which we all know about hallucinations and all the problems, and in the world in which
it's the most mature product. It is the most mature product.
And yes, and part of it is that thing I sort of always suspected, and I do still think is true, which is when you ground the thing in just a subset of, it's not going out to MSN for the latest news. It's like, look, we need to know how C# works. We need to know how these programming frameworks work, et cetera. It's building on a very finite database, if you will. So
yeah, it's got a scope to it that makes sense.
Now, look, I'm not a professional programmer, but that was the point. I thought the first thing I did with it was I selected a method that did a thing and had whatever code. And I thought, and I can't remember how I worded it, but I just said, make this more efficient or faster or better or whatever it was. I forgot to check a box that would have deselected or had it ignore the rest of the document. So it actually ran against the entire thing, which is the main C# file in this project. And it came up with a bunch of stuff. And some of them were like curious and subtle. And some of them were stuff I kind of knew, like, getting rid of redundancies. I went through a big effort to make the code more modular, but it had more suggestions along those lines. All very good. And I was like, okay, just for this, like, this is amazing. There was I can't even explain this. It was like there's a list, a construct I'm using in C# to collect all of the state management stuff that I'm working on for the app. And it suggested this other thing, which is really subtly different, but in fact will work better with WPF controls, which I will be doing in the future when I add tabs. And I was like, yep, genius. Okay. So I was like, this is nice. This is good. Like, I was like, okay, I 100% get this. But then I started just working on new stuff. I wasn't thinking about Copilot. And here's the thing, like, I'm trying to imagine what this would be like in Word if you were writing like a document, but I'm writing code. And I am writing what's going to be a block of code that's going to do a thing. It's going to iterate through this object and reach into parts of it and pull whatever bit out. I know what I'm going to write roughly. And what I mean by that is I don't know the exact code as I write it, but I know as I do it, I'll do it.
The sort of shape of things, right?
Yeah. Like, I have the idea. So I start I swear to God, I don't want to exaggerate. Like I said, I typed, I want to say 2 characters, and it didn't just auto-complete the line. It auto-completed the code block that it could not have known I was going for. Like, it literally read my mind. Yeah. And I was like,
you telegraphed.
Yep, that's exact. I was like, that's it. 100%. It wrote it. And I was like, are you kidding me? And then over the course of the next hour or two, I was so excited about this. I told my wife, who, I got to be honest, could not care less. She puts up with it. I'm trying. I'm so excited. I'm like a little kid. And the only thing I can equate this to is I watch a lot. I think I said this earlier in the show. I watch a lot of these kind of animal videos on like YouTube and Instagram, whatever. The one video I saw recently, this is exactly the reaction, the interaction. It was a video of cats being shown magic. And the cats react exactly as they should. their reality has been destroyed and it scares the living daylights out of them. So in many cases, it's just a trick, like the cord is gone or the whatever it is, like a normal magic trick. And the cats like jump and run out of the room and they freak out and they lose their minds. And that was literally the reaction I had to this because look, I'm a skeptic, I'm a cynic. And I was like, look, all I could hope from this is that it will improve the quality of the code, which it absolutely needs. And it is like it was reading my mind. I couldn't believe it.
How do you think it did that, by the way?
I think it literally read my mind, Leo. I'm glad you asked.
No, I didn't.
No, I don't.
Kitty cat.
I mean, so I'm leaving out a few details, but
it must have known from previous code what you were on your way to do.
That could be part of it. In one case, I did write a comment before I wrote the block. Okay. So it's possible it looked at that and said, okay. But there were multiple examples
write a comment
where
to describe what you intend to do, and it spits the code out.
And it wasn't. I want to be clear. I wasn't even thinking of Copilot. I was just
the comment is the prompt says out of sync, and I think that's accurate. When you write a comment, you're actually writing a prompt.
Okay, I accept that. What I'm saying is I didn't know that at the time. And then I wrote the code block, and I'm like, "What is happening?" And
neither did the Siamese cat. In this, just how it works.
Where did the quarter go? Analogy. Where's the quarter?
Yeah,
no, but I listen. Not a professional developer. I want to highlight that again. But if you are a developer and you've kind of poo-pooed this, I'm just saying it's free.
No, it's amazing.
You should look at it. Look at it. It's unbelievable.
I'm talking to teams now where if the developer's not using Copilot, it's not like they won't hire him. It's like they immediately like, we need to teach how to use this.
Are you writing code on a parchment? How are you doing work? You know, like
I see you brought your chisel.
It's fascinating to me because it's slowly spreading throughout all our shows. Steve Gibson had the same experience with assembly code. Yesterday, Jason Snell said, "I can't believe it." But I can't remember what model he was using. I think ChatGPT knows AppleScript. So AppleScript,
Cloud is good at this too. Anthropic Cloud,
Claude does very well. Yeah.
The very first thing I ever did was I had written the C# class for this coming thing I'm doing, and I wrote about it. And then that day they announced an update to Cloud, and they said specifically like it's better for programming. I'm like, oh, let me give it a prompt and say I want to make this class. What does it look like? It made it was almost identical, and that was good for me because it kind of verified that I had written the right thing, unless we both hallucinated somehow.
You're looking for validation from software. Already in trouble.
To be the skeptic, one of the reasons this works so well is because it has a massive database of code, and code is extraordinarily repetitive. Yeah. So,
oh my God, of course.
But somebody else has written that many, many times, and so it's not, And
all the more reason you shouldn't write it again. Let the tool do its job.
Precisely.
You're reading through a database on a loop. But you want every third one.
Right.
Is there an efficient way to do that?
You're not the first person to do that.
I know that. But I do what everyone else does. I Google it. I usually end up at stackoverflow.com.
Steal their code.
Nope, not that one. But it takes me time. This one I just said for. I was like, what the how?
Oh, you want a loop. Okay.
I didn't say anything about every third one. It's like ampersand 3, blah, blah. I'm like,
hysterical.
You gotta be kidding me. It was
really
unbelievable. Yeah. Really good.
Yeah. This is on the one hand, it is magic. On the other hand, we are cats.
I know.
There are some things that might make us feel a little bit less magical about it, like the fact that this is really based on code that's been written many, many, many times. And so,
no, but that's the convenience, right? In other words, like I said, we could.
It's hugely convenient.
All of us have done this. We've Googled it.
I've been saying this for 2 years. I've been using ChatGPT for my comment.
Yeah, but now that I've seen it, it's real. I mean, I don't even
cool it's actually better.
Talks, no.
The older the language, the better, right? And that also is consonant with the idea that it's actually. The more in the database,
right? I don't necessarily older, but size of data set.
This came up with one of your shows, Richard. I think it probably .NET Rocks, and it was probably the guy who used to run Flutter. Forgetting his former Microsoft. Chris Sells. He was saying, one of the problems with Flutter is that, in the .NET space, which is what I'm working in, if you Google something, there's a million, because this stuff goes back 20 years. There's a million.
Yeah.
But if you need some help with like Flutter or one of these newer frameworks, probably
exactly.
There's less.
The data set is very limited.
So I mean, yes, that might have helped too. But look, If you're working in Visual Studio, and
TCL's been around a long, long time, but there's not a lot of open source TCL.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's really was the data set available to it.
Yeah, so that's another thing. Use an open source language like Common Lisp. It's really interesting to me that AppleScript, which is a terrible language and weirdly arcane, it turns out these AIs are very good at writing, and he used the code unmodified.
Well, that's great though, because you need the help with something like
you
that.
Need it.
We need it everywhere.
You don't want that stuff in your head.
Yeah. What do you call it in Visual Studio or even
IntelliSense?
Office, I think IntelliSense when it does autocomplete or whatever. It's one of the nice things about Visual Studio. You object name dot list. You're like, yep, I want that one dot. But you kind of go from there, right? It's a nicety. It's more than a nicety, honestly. Once you start using something like that, you kind of wonder, God, how did I do this before? You were breaking open a book, looking up the list of properties and stuff.
That's what you did.
Yeah, slowly. So this to me is not an order of magnitude, but it's the same level of, oh my God. And then
you see this reaction when someone uses IntelliSense for the first time, especially an experienced coder, and they're like, what? Okay.
Yeah, no, it's this will benefit anybody who uses these products. Like it's incredible. And I've not had this reaction to any AI, anything about writing although the poem thing in Notepad is amazing. But other than that, that's on hands-on Windows, by the way. It is amazing. It's stupid. It's useless, but it's amazing. But this is just
incredibly
immediately
useful.
And obviously a huge productivity booster that absolutely justifies the cost if you're going to pay for it.
Dude, I wrestle around with like Razor pages for the RunAs site and have Copilot. It's like, where is X? And it's like, it's in this stupid header file. I'm like, oh, thank God. Okay.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
And look, anyone who's watched this show for any amount of time knows I don't talk about almost anything. It is amazing.
Paul Thurrott making happy noises? What is
I know.
This?
I don't even know how to handle it. I'm like, what is that feeling? It's like you're happy. Is that what this feels like? Why aren't I like this all the time? No, I mean, it's
awful.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Thank you for reminding me. But yeah, no, I can't, I'm just going to repeat myself.
It's a revelation.
It's amazing.
It truly is.
Yeah, it really is.
I feel refreshed. Let's talk about Xbox.
I want to do a screen share.
That's not frustrating at all.
Yeah, this isn't as good. So I think we touched on this last week a little bit, but during CES, Microsoft kind of hinted at this, said literally, we want to do more around gaming handhelds. But of course, the question that comes out of this is, but like PC gaming handhelds or Xbox gaming handhelds, right? And so
same kernel.
Yeah. So and I think this is the holding pattern we're in as a platform. I think when people are nervous about Xbox in the future and hardware, what's going on, and I think we're waiting for this to kind of coalesce into something that's more of a strategy and less of like vague talking every couple of months, So we'll see what that looks like. But I'm interested in, because I've returned to PC gaming to some degree, the notion of a Switch-sized PC game machine is actually kind of interesting, other than the tiny screen I can't see with my really old eyes. But I like the idea of it. I like the idea of something you can stick in the bag, and that becomes
the essence of a Steam Deck anyway.
Yeah, right. So Lenovo is selling a portable gaming device or PC that you can choose between SteamOS and Windows. And this is the first, and I think right now the only, but there will be more of those devices. And this is another pain point for Xbox people, because SteamOS is going to kill us. This is what's going to happen. It's like, guys, relax. I mean, there were pros and cons. I think we talked about this, but Linux is great because it uses fewer system resources. Good. But Windows is better for compatibility, and you have a choice of stores. It's not just Steam. I mean, Steam is, I guess, the big one, but it's not the only one, right? And if I don't have numbers for this, but I bet most PC gamers just go wherever, get the games wherever. I mean, they get them all over the place. And I bet some percentage uses some form of Game Pass, and they can play from that library as well. So I think choice is good here. I like to see, I guess I'm just vaguely happy that this is working out. I feel like a lot of these other PC form factors kind of come and go, but I feel like this one's going to stick around. So that's kind of cool. And speaking of angst, Microsoft is going to, I can say, it's sort of couched like they might be bringing other games to other platforms. No, I mean, they are. Like, we know this, right? There's a coming second remake of Halo coming down the pike. Absolutely going to be on Sony PlayStation. You know it is, right? So that's going to happen. There's been a bunch of people who have cited various sources. Flight Simulator is coming to PlayStation, and even the Switch 2, which is kind of interesting. Tied to that is a lot of Switch 2 rumors of the past week. As soon as tomorrow, I guess Nintendo could announce this. I'm a little surprised by how much it is just the Switch again. I mean, obviously it's a much faster processor and there are other improvements.
It's just a hardware refresh, really.
It's for all the waiting and wondering and what's going on and what is this? What's the next thing going to be? It's going to be like, it's more of the same, which maybe is the right thing to do.
What do you do with perfection, right? Like what choice?
Yeah, there you go. You find a younger model, Richard. That's what you do. So yes,
with a little faster chip inside.
Yeah, it might actually be like twice as fast. It's a significally better chip.
It's been several years, right? Like Switch was out. Yeah,
and they were rumored to do something like this a few years ago. They did like the OLED version, the light version, and I think there was supposed to be talk of a 4K version or something, but I think obviously not. I think they didn't do it, so now we're going to get the Switch 2. So that's fine, and they can probably keep the old one.
There's a lot of memory, and for what?
For Call of Duty, for Flight Simulator, 2024.
They don't do realism graphics in Nintendo land, right?
I know. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how those ported games look. But that's like Nintendo already won that generation, this current generation, by a wide margin. They're looking good. And then they could come up with a thing that could kind of fill in the gaps, frankly. So there's these Sony games that I don't know if those are going anywhere. I know they go to PC, but Xbox games that could come to this platform that I think would solve or answer some questions, right? Like I like the idea of the Switch, but I don't play a lot of those types of games. So if it had some shooters and some things like that, it's like, oh yeah, no, maybe.
Maybe you're just playing the wrong games, Paul. That's all.
That's absolutely true.
Animal Crossing may not have any violence.
Can I snipe the animals as they cross?
Yeah. Is that quite part of the enjoyable?
I just want to set up a sniper's nest. Is it wrong? I don't.
Yeah,
probably.
No, the answer is
rocket of Zelda frowned upon.
Zelda has fighting, doesn't it? There's some combat in Zelda.
Of a sort. Yes.
Yeah. That sounds. Yeah. What do they argue? What do you mean fighting? Like
they swing a sword. One of them pops into a jewel.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You clearly played the game, Richard.
There are no jewels or coins or whatever in the games I play. I don't know.
It's all about the mushrooms.
I did get attacked by a dog in Call of Duty Mobile the other day, though, so that's still a thing.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And then Microsoft announced an expansion, I think, of their iFixit partnership, where they're selling official Xbox repair parts. And You Break Fix is coming on board to do the same. But they're going to, this is a company that has locations you can bring an Xbox to and they'll repair it for you instead of, shipping it to Microsoft and hoping for the best, I guess. So they're making these things more easily repairable, essentially. So it's good.
Nice.
It's good.
Although how you would break an Xbox, I don't know. I mean,
I kicked mine through the wall one time.
That's one way.
I don't know what's going on. It's a lot slower than it used to be.
Mine's tucked deep inside the television console.
I blew a metric ton of dust out of the back of one the other day. I'm pretty sure that was doing something
for sure. Yeah. Dust.
There's a black mark on the carpet behind it. On the I don't know what's going on.
Fan blows.
Yeah, it's just not doing good. I don't know.
All right. Good show. Do you want to do any other Xbox stuff? Or are you going backwards?
I think. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, I skipped ahead. I'm sorry.
You're moving backwards.
The other thing is, I feel like this happens now throughout the year. This used to be 1, 2, 3, whatever events a year, but now it's just kind of all the time because it's online. So next week, I think on the 28th, do I have this? No, 23rd. Sorry. Microsoft is hosting a developer direct live stream. So this is where we're going to finally get to see this new Doom game, which I have to say, definitely I'm going to try, because it's so different from Call of Duty. But I am looking forward to that. So
not a lot of sandworms in Call of Duty.
Yes. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, you don't go to hell in Call of Duty a lot, except metaphorically. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's what I decided to. That's why I'm playing so much piano. I decided instead of compulsively playing Valheim, I'm going to compulsively play the piano. And
That
maybe
does
at the end of a year, I'll have accomplished something
A
besides.
lot more Frere Jacques in one version.
Yep. I'm going to type Frere Jacques into GitHub Copilot and see what it comes up with.
There you go. It's a
Wouldn't it be
speech
cool
bubble.
if you could use an AI? Well, I guess that wouldn't be cool.
Major C chords.
I did actually use an AI to make some music for you last week. The whiskey
Sure.
Yes.
music. I will not play that again. Sorry about
Everybody's still traumatized.
that. Yes. You're watching Windows Weekly. That's Paul Thurrott there. He is, of course, from Thurrott.com. And to make sure you get a premium subscription for a lot of more goodness. It's a great site to visit. I visit every day, quite literally. And, of course, his books are at leanpub.com. Richard Campbell is the host of two fabulous podcasts, RunAs Radio. We'll talk about the latest episode in just a bit. And also with Carl Franklin, .NET Rocks, if you're a .NET person. Do you guys talk about the Paul's .NET woes or?
No, I think this is below
There's
that.
so many woes.
There's so many woes, so little
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for joining us. We're so glad you're here. Time for the back of the book. And let's start with a tip of the week from Paul Thurrott. Paul?
Yeah, we ran into some friends last weekend at a party or whatever, and it became really clear immediately like they were not drinking, which is fascinating because these guys are definitely alcoholics. They drink way more than I do. And I was like, what are you doing? And
It's a January, right?
Dry January. So I was like,
Yeah.
that's curious. I said, do you do this every year? And she said, no, it's the first time we've done it. And I was
By the way,
"Yeah,
that's how you know you're drinking too much if you participate. In
This is
dry
the first day I've not had a drink, literally. Yeah, no, I was like, that just doesn't work for me. So I was kind of thinking about this because a lot of people do this. Like if you go to the gym now is packed, right? It's full of people, can't get on machines. You know they're going to be gone by the February 1st, right?
Yep.
Hurry up
So-
and give up on your resolution.
Yeah. So how many times does that have to happen before you're like, maybe there's something like a different approach to this? So without it getting into the weeds, I'll just keep this to kind of work related stuff. I try to make what I think of as micro changes, like smaller changes, but I do it more frequently. So it's not a hard schedule, but I have this kind of monthly, quarterly, and then annual thing that I try to do, just maintaining files and archiving things and all that kind of stuff. So because it was January, this was a perfect storm of these things. But a lot of it just has to, and it's inbox zero for email kind of factors into this, or, where things are replicated or backed up or whatever kind of factors into this. And, but the big change for me was if you go back, I guess a year ago, I had just finished my big digital decluttering, photo consolidation, work, which was just this epic multi-month awful process. But I did this knowing that every year January would come every year and I'd have to go get all the photos from the previous year and then organize them in the same way. Right. So I just started working on that, it's not like awesome. I mean, I have to use these tools that I've forgotten how to use because I used them a year ago and it's been a while and I'm going to do this now every year for the rest of my life or whatever. But I think it gets easier too because digital photos taken with phones are just, full of metadata. They're easy. But it's just, rather than like, I'm just not going to drink, it's like, yeah, are you though? I mean, I think it just, everyone's different. I guess maybe that works for some people, but it's never worked for me. So I try to just do smaller things and, but more of them, I guess. And it's like Valentine's Day, it's like, I guess you could wait until this random day to tell your wife or girlfriend or spouse or whoever it is that you love them, or you just do this throughout the year, right? Why do you need a stupid day for that? I don't know. Okay. And then the app pick, there was no announcement and I didn't write about it yet, but Startup put out Start 11 version 2.5. This is the one that they were beta testing earlier that lets you put the taskbar on the sides of the screen like God wants you to.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. So if you kind of held off on this or whatever, or weren't sure you needed it or wanted it, that might be enough to put it over the top. There's actually a bunch of stuff in there related to businesses and managing this across like deployment and all that kind of stuff. But for individuals, the big thing to me is you can move the taskbar, which Microsoft still doesn't let you do in Windows 11.
No, I got giant screens. I don't need a bar all the way across the bottom of it. My vertical resolution is everything.
I know.
That's lines of code, man. I think it matters.
I agree. So you can do it with that. That's one way.
There you go. All right.
Okay.
Now I can migrate the dev machine to Win 11 because Start 11 exists.
Because of Start 11. Oh, jeez. Well, by the way, there you go. Clearing up deployment blockers since Windows 8.
There you go. Guys.
But they've been doing this start menu for a long time, right? I mean,
Yes, it's Windows 8. Windows 8 was the very, like Brad Wardell.
I remember that. Yeah.
He was at some event with me and Mary Jo, and he's like, ooh, I have an idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to fix this problem.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Nice.
Yep.
Okie dokie. Hey, you know what that means? It's time for Richard Campbell. Let's start with a RunAs Radio pick of the week.
I have my friend Matthias Carlson back on the show. It's been a little while, and we were talking about DevOps docs, or just a shorthand for part of your CI/CD pipeline should include some level of documentation generation. Most software that you're building or responsible for, you need some level of documentation around it. APIs are the classic one, but also resource allocations, like what are you using in the cloud, that sort of thing. Because often you need to refer to it, and different folks need different things, right? Certainly from the operations side, rarely can we count on developers when they make an update to a software saying, hey, we've now incorporated this new platform in it. So the fact that we can have a tool that analyzes the deploy and then builds up that list is usually the moment where we find out, oh, we're now using XYZ resource. Is that being built in the right location? Is it properly allocated with the right resource tags? Like all of the things that operations folks care about for resourcing more than devs do. So that just catching those. But it also was useful from the perspective of if you're building AI or API documentation, inevitably when you make those docs, they are already wrong. So having the build process bound to generating those files just means you're more likely to have accurate API documentation. There was a good conversation about this should just be part of the pipeline, even if it has an edit pass afterwards. That routine set of updating was really, really important. So it was good, proper DevOpsy type talk about how do we do this, stuff. Include this in the process, just so that it's not out of date.
I have a friend who specializes in writing tests for CI/CD deployment, so that you automatically test before you push.
Yeah.
Seems like a good idea, right?
Do a build into pre-prod, right? And then you run it through, testing can be very expensive. I've got projects where they have big, service level agreements. And so we actually have to benchmark the new versions. They will actually support the SLA. They need a transaction rate like this.
Perfect.
Before you deploy. Right?
Test it before you deploy. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
seems simple.
Yeah, you have to run it in. The cloud makes this dramatically easier. I used to build racks of hardware for this.
Oh, yeah.
Actually build a simulated prod.
CI/CD is kind of amazing, really.
Yeah, and it just got so much easier as we were able to build it out in the cloud. So I've got some Azure DevOps shows coming, as well as GitHub Actions and things like that, just because, our lives are better. This used to be a lot harder.
Oh, yeah. Hey, don't let Paul know, but I think it's time to talk about a liquor pick of the week.
Oh my goodness gracious. I would never. It's dry January.
Dry January.
How could I even do my job if I was dry?
Little Paul. I got little
I'm
Paul
in Mexico. Like, you want to be sober here.
By the way, it's going to be an Arctic freeze next week in Macungie, Paul. Run. Run.
Time to come.
Polar vortex is on its way. Yeah. All right.
I popped down to the commissary here at Vedanta and looked around at a few things. Because I've done tequila here before. We might do that next week with Paul, but this week I noticed in the export section they had Buchanan's, which I hadn't talked about before. I usually don't find this in Canada, so it's always fun to grab one you don't usually see. It's a blend, and one of the famous original blends going way back, James Buchanan. And to be clear, this is not the James Buchanan who became the president of the United States. It's a different guy. Known as one of the great whiskey barons, although we'll talk about that a little later on. Actually born 1854 in Canada from Scottish immigrant parents who decided it was a bad idea, and shortly after his birth moved back to the United Kingdom. And he was, again, it's almost like he was of a time that in the late 1800s, his initial jobs were working in the whiskey trade, mostly buy, sell, that kind of thing. And he saw, working in London for a Scottish company, that the marketplace was looking for milder whiskeys. And so he set about to make his own blend, right? And this is One of the reasons that blends were so popular back in the day is that we weren't into making 12-year-old plus whiskeys. We were aging in barrels, but only for a few years. And so they were pretty harsh. And introducing grain spirits and things were about actually smoothing stuff out. And so at 30 years old in 1884, he sets up James Buchanan and Co., uses all the contacts from his earlier jobs buying and selling the resources around whiskey to be able to buy and blend his own whiskey called Buchanan's Blend. He's also responsible for a whiskey sold to this day called Black and White because it had a black bottle with a white label. And he's a hustler, like a good salesperson, gets out there. In fact, by 1895, just a few years later, he has a royal warrant from Queen Victoria. So it's a product that the Queen will buy. And it's, there's still a little seal on the bottle to remind us all that no, he's got a royal warrant there. He finally built his own distillery in 1898. It's called Glentochers. It still exists today. You've never heard of it because they've never sold a single malt. It was built as a blending whiskey from the outset, initially making Buchanan, although in the 1980s, when the market was on hard times and the production was low, Allied distillers bought it in 1989. They were then acquired by Chivas, which is now Pernod Ricard. But so Glentochers still makes whiskey, but they make it and goes in Ballantines now, just a different blend. And then he forms the alliance in 1950 with John Dewar and Sons, to create the brand they call Scotch Whiskey Brands, which is soon named Buchanan Dewar because they didn't own the only Scotch whiskey brands. And they set upon their acquisition spree coming out of World War I. So they bought Port Allen and Isla, Le Caron. In 1922, they got Ben Rennes. And then this then merges together to become the Distillers Company in 1925. Which is I also now appreciating as I'm reading more about all of the people involved, like the Tommy and John Dewar. They were all getting on by the late 20s, and so they wanted to retire. They became directors with a larger company underneath them by forming Distillers Company. In fact, Buchanan passes in 1935. And then by the 80s, the Distillers Company gets acquired by Guinness. Guinness and Grand Metropolitan merge together, and that's Diageo by 1997. So that's sort of the chain of events for a blender who then eventually made other whiskeys. And like I said, he was one of the whiskey barons. And we've talked about the whiskey barons before, just kind of indirectly. One would argue that the original whiskey baron is John Alexander Dewar, one of John Dewar's sons. And when I talked about Dewar's 8, I mentioned this, that John Dewar had his sons get involved. John Alexander was the one who stayed home and ran the facilities for doing the blending and eventually built some distilleries and things. And his brother Tommy went to London and sort of lived the higher life of promoting whiskey. Eventually goes over to New York. They make the first promotional film about whiskey ever. Like these folks that they eventually call the barons, they were about branding before branding was a thing. In some ways, they invented branding and put Scottish whiskey into the world purview, not just inside of Scotland. And they literally became barons. So John Alexander Dewar was also a politician. I mean, he was a stay-at-home guy. So he was the Lord Provost of Perth, and he became a Liberal MP and so forth. And he was granted a barony. He became the Baron Fortavoy in 1917. His brother Tom became the Baron Dewar in 1919. Now, he didn't do it because he was a good politician. He did it because he was buddies with Edward VII. Who was a prince at the time. Yeah. Apparently, there were 3 of them hanging out. There's another Tommy, a guy named Tommy Lipton, as in Lipton tea. Lipton. Oh, wow. So, and Edward VII was the son of Queen Victoria, and he actually did become king briefly for about 9 years, 1901 to 1910, and then he passed, and then it was George V, and then George V passed in the 50s, and that became Queen Elizabeth II.
You left out Edward VIII, but no one wants to remember him. So
yeah, we'll leave that part. And Edward VII also had the very first car in Britain.
Oh, neat.
He's a Daimler Mail Phaeton that he got in 1900. The second car, Tommy Lipton. The third car, Tommy Dewar.
These guys are great. This is that video we showed last week or the week before of them dancing in kilts and stuff, right? Yeah, that was the first ad for whiskey.
That first ad that they made in New York, right?
Hysterical.
So and so I think the problem here is you've got a prince who's hanging around with some movers and shakers type. Like, they were very popular in Scotland, right? They were very wealthy. They were the nouveau riche, and they were hanging with the old schoolers. And so making him a baron was a way for Edward to not look like he was, hanging with the lessers. Although, again, they were educated and articulate and intelligent and good contributors to society. Like, these are not bad people. And James Buchanan falls in the same category. He never was ever a politician. He was famously known to be extremely well-dressed as he started making money. And he made a lot of money. He was the driver behind the Distillers Company and all of those mergers. And one could argue, and you read some of his writings on this stuff, he was saving these distilleries that were going defunct. Right, that he liked the industry and he wanted things to go well. And so bringing them in and protecting their brands was part of the equation. During World War I, when everything shut down, he actually volunteered his services for no pay. He worked in the government in munitions. And along with some other, James Stevenson, who actually was part of Johnny Walker, did very much the same thing. Ultimately ended up working for Churchill. And so coming out of World War I, Buchanan is granted a barony. He becomes the Baron Wolverlington in 1922, and same thing happened to Stevenson. He became the Baron Stevenson. There's more of them. I won't keep going on about
It's hysterical.
But yeah, these guys all
these are the oligarchs of the turn of the last century.
And at one point, Buchanan's the third wealthiest person in all of Britain for making whiskey that's distributed around the world. So. Yeah, they call them the whiskey barons because they literally were granted baronies.
Wow.
So, meantime, we got ourselves some Buchanan 12. Its recipe it's a blend, obviously, so it's a bit of a secret as to what it is. It's tasty. There's a little hint of peat in there. It's not real potent. Now, the rumor mill says that this is a blend of Glendullan, which you've never heard of. Again, another distillery primarily making blends, although they do have a special edition they call the Singleton. Dalwhinnie is a popular spey, great stuff, probably part of the blend. Also Talisker and Cow Ila, which are both Islay whiskeys, so they're a bit, smokier and so forth. There's a big chunk of single grain in here and some grain alcohol to dilute it down to keep the price down. Because if you can find this bottle, and it's not that tough to come by in the U.S., I found it on Bevmo, $30. So not a wildly pricey whiskey. You got a lot of choices when it comes to blended whiskeys. I've always recommended like the Dewar's 12, but Buchanan falls cleanly into that category. This is original, popular Scottish whiskey going back more than 100 years, made by a group of people who put Scottish whiskey on the map and became barons in the process.
As opposed to baron.
And there you have it.
Which is slightly different.
Is it a wacky story? Like just to...
It's how you become a baron. That's just make some whiskey.
In this day and age.
Yeah. Now this is the deluxe you're drinking, but they have these other blends like the Master, which is a little older, I guess.
Yeah, this is kind of the lead. This is the base product,
and then the Special Reserve 18 years and the Red Seal 20. Are they better?
They are more expensive.
Yeah, that means they're better, right?
And remember, if they got the year on it, it means that's the youngest thing in the bottle.
Right. All right.
It gets pricier from there.
Just checking. I choose my whiskey by price. That's how
it can't go wrong. And by the way, the $30 bottle, like, don't feel bad to put a little soda in this.
Yeah, I notice. I always know when it's that kind of whiskey because they have at the bottom of the website. They have here's some recipes for what to do. Put it in the Pina Fizz or a Bucalata. Don't order a Bucalata or a Pina shot.
Bucalata. What?
Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we have come to the end of this fine episode of Windows Weekly. I hope you have enjoyed it. Next week, Paul and Richard will be sitting next to each other. Actually,
probably hammered, by the way.
What you should do is you're going to be in Puerto Vallarta.
Okay.
Yeah. You should, because it's dry January, best time to drink. You should, Paul, you should rent Elizabeth Taylor's house. Richard, you should rent Richard Burton's house, and you should do the podcast on the bridge between
on the bridge.
Yeah,
very famous.
Oh,
bridge.
Romeo, wherefore art thou?
And Burton pretty much always brought a bottle of whiskey with him when he went over that bridge. So I think you're in good company.
There's no other way that Exorcist 2 happens. I mean, it all makes sense.
Thurrott is at thurrott.com, THURRO.com. Become a premium member for all the goodness, although there's lots of great free stuff. It's a great way to keep up on what's going on in between Windows Weekly episodes. He also writes many good books, including The Field Guide to Windows 11 and Windows Everywhere, his latest about the kind of a history of Windows through its coding frameworks. That's available at leanpub.com. Set your own price at leanpub.com. Richard Campbell's website is runasradio.com. He also hosts .NET Rocks with Carl Franklin. You'll find them both at runasradio.com, and you'll find them both here along with most of the time me on Wednesdays, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1900 UTC.
Leo, I would go so far as to say you might be a staple of the show.
Maybe not. I don't want to claim ownership. I'm just along for the ride. Make me a Baron, okay?
A Baron.
I'm Baron of Twit. That's good.
Baron. The Baron.
I like it.
Baron
One arm. You can watch us do the show live of a Wednesday by tuning in, if you're a club member, to our Club Twit Discord. But you can also go to Twitch, YouTube, TikTok. Now, that may change next week. We'll see. That's all up in the air. We're going to talk about that next on This Week in Google. We're also on x.com, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Kick. So lots of places you could watch live. If you're watching live, we do watch the chat as well. And I often chat in with the people. So please feel free to join those and join us live. That's, the advantage of chatting is, you're watching live. Nobody's really there later after the fact, but you can listen on your own schedule. Just download a copy of the show. There's several places you can get it. Paul's got a link at his website, thurrott.com. You can also, of course, go to our website, twit.tv/WW for Windows Weekly. There's a link there. Not only can you get the show there, audio or video, there's a link there to the YouTube videos. That's a really useful thing for sharing little clips, little pieces of the show. And there's other things there. For instance, the playlist of Richard's whiskey talks. We've made a great playlist there. And you have a direct link to it, right, Richard? What is that URL again? Did it
dumb URL?
Did it populate? I forgot.
Something weird from my closet.
Oh, yeah.
Something weird from my closet.com. Okay.
Beautiful.
and it's all working now too. So
is it working? Good. All right.
If you go to something weird from mycloset.com, you will land on the whiskey play.
You'll get the whiskey playlist. After the fact, probably the best way to get the show is to subscribe in a podcast player. You'll find Windows Weekly there. We've been doing this show forever and ever, 15, 16 years. So most podcast players have finally cottoned on to the idea that it exists. We're going to be, our 1,000th episode is in a couple of years, believe it or not. We're at 915. It's amazing.
I can't do
2
math,
years.
but 2 years, I guess.
A little less.
Yeah, I'm at 967 on RunAs. So like this fall for 1,000.
I mean, when do we lap you? How does that? Oh yeah,
never. He's
I got to miss a few weeks.
He's running faster than we are.
My son asked me when he was a little kid, like, when will I be as old as you? And I said, after I die.
Yeah,
that's true. That's a good point. I never thought of it that way. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, on that bright note,
Sorry.
Thank you for joining us. And we will see you all next week on Windows Weekly. Bye, guys.